A sizable chunk had been taken right out of her. Strange, given that I didn't recall her taking any hits, she explained. Its scale cut me. Apparently, its outer shell was razor sharp. Basic tear healing magic was sufficient to close the wound without even so much as a scratch left behind. The same injury would have required dozens of stitches in my previous world. The magic of this world sure was convenient.
Thank you.
Now came the issue of how to deal with the source of her injury, the Hydra. Paul plopped himself down in front of the magic circle. He fixed his gaze on it, murderous intent oozing from his body like a poison mist. Father?
That was Zenith. I'm sure of it.
His eyes hadn't even registered Elenialis's injury, although she was our tank, so you could say getting injured was just a part of her job. Even so, please, calm down a bit.
Yeah, that was my bad. I'm fine now.
Paul's voice was low. He was calm, but he wasn't cool-headed. The words calm before the storm came to mind. Not much I could do. He was right. That was Zenith. Even from afar, I could instantly tell it was her. I was sure Paul wouldn't be mistaken about something like this, either. The person trapped within that magically imbued crystal was certainly Zenith. But why in the world was she encased in there? No, the reason didn't matter. There were many potential explanations. Maybe when the displacement incident happened, she was warped inside the crystal. It was rare for such a thing to occur, but rare just meant unlikely, not impossible. But wait, hadn't Geese told us she'd been found by adventurers? The word he'd used was captured. Hold on, did that mean Geese had known what kind of condition she was in? No, impossible. That couldn't be. It wouldn't do any good to interrogate him about the framing of his information here. I could press him for questions later, after this was over. That wasn't the problem right now. I wonder if she's still alive in there.
What's that? It doesn't matter whether she's alive or not.
Paul leaped to his feet and grabbed me by the collar of my shirt. You're right. He had a point. That was inappropriate of me to say. Zenith's chances of survival had been abysmal to begin with. I'd even considered the possibility we might not find a body at all, maybe nothing more than a memento, something that she'd left behind. We could at least hold on to that in our grief if she really were dead. You could say that finding her this way, with her body in one piece, was far better than we could have hoped.
Enough with the fighting!
But Paul just leaned his face in toward me, as if to intimidate me.
Rudy, she's there. Zenith is there, your mother. How can you be so calm?
You would prefer I panic? How would me losing my composure solve anything?
That's not what I'm talking about.
I knew what he meant. True, maybe I was being a bit too cool-headed right now. My attitude certainly wasn't appropriate for a child who'd found their mother after she'd been missing for 6 years. But, well, I hadn't had much contact with Zenith since I was a child. I didn't really have a strong sense of her being my mother. If anything, she was more like a person that just happened to have lived with us. After all, I'd left their house when I was 7 years old and hadn't seen her for almost 10 years. So maybe it wasn't entirely my fault that I was having a lukewarm reaction. For now, let's just get on the same page about our current predicament.
Huh?
Our magic didn't work on that Guardian. It has incredible regenerative abilities, and its offensive strength is so overwhelming that it broke past Miss Elenialis's defenses just by brushing up against her. Then there's my mother, who's trapped inside a crystal. Frankly speaking, we don't know if she's alive or not.
Piss off! I already know all that. I'm saying that's not the attitude to have when we finally found her.
I told you, knock it off. You can squabble when we get back to the inn.
This time he forcibly peeled Paul off me. Paul spat under his breath as he plunked down onto the floor.
Damn it, enough of this.
He already understood the situation. He didn't need me to go spell it out for him. It was just my attitude that he couldn't stand. Even I could agree that I was being too unemotional, but I couldn't help it. What did he want me to do?
All right, enough with the fighting. Now let's discuss.
Both Paul and I took our sweet time joining them in their circle on the floor. Roxy looked a bit flustered as she glanced between the two of us. It seemed I'd worried her. I'm fine.
Are you sure?
It wasn't the first time something like this had happened between us. Once things were finished, Paul would come to his senses. I was sure I'd feel something too, once Zenith was safe and I could hear her voice again. That's right, that had to be true. Things had just gotten a little off kilter this time, that was all.
As for Zenith being crystallized, I think there's something we can do about that.
Really?
Yes, I've heard occasional tales of powerful magic items encased in magic crystal. Once we defeat the Guardian, the crystal will liquefy and we'll be able to get her out. Or at least so the stories say.
That wasn't something I'd ever heard before. Still, this was Roxy. I was sure she wouldn't make things up.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. I know of one other person who was once like Zenith is now, and they're still alive.
That one had to be a lie. Elenilis was the kind to smoothly spin a tale in these kinds of situations. I couldn't blame her if she was doing it to try ease the tension, but the precedent didn't mean that Zenith would be fine. Not that I needed to say so. Everyone already knew that.
Our problem is that Guardian. Honestly, I've never seen a monster of that variety before.
No kiddin'. I can tell by looking that it's a Hydra, but I've never heard of one with green scales before.
Not just that, the thing can regenerate itself too.
A Hydra was a type of dragon, a lone wolf with multiple heads, its strength unmatched. As far as I knew, they were supposed to inhabit some parts of the demon continent. There were 3 currently confirmed varieties, split up by the color of their scales, white, gray, and gold. There was no such thing as a Hydra with green scales.
That's most likely a manatite Hydra. I've read about it in a book. It's an infernal dragon whose entire body is covered in magic stone scales that absorb mana. It was spotted during the Second Great Human-Demon War, and according to the book, they were annihilated when the continent was split. I was sure it was nothing more than a fairy tale, but it seems it does exist.
Mana absorption. Did that mean all magic was useless against it? Are you saying that we won't be able to damage it at all?
If what I've read is true, you should be able to hit it with your spells, as long as you launch them at point-blank range.
Point-blank range. That thing was huge. Not to mention that it would carve you up like a cheese grater if its body made contact with yours. Was she telling me to put my hand directly up against that thing to try to cast my spells? I could lose all my fingers.
Still gonna revive itself even if you damage it.
Its ability to regenerate certainly is a nuisance.
But the damn thing can't be invincible.
The Hydra could regenerate, which wasn't surprising at all to me. As far as I was concerned, that was common knowledge.
We clipped its heads off and it healed them right back to normal. How were we supposed to defeat something like that?
Roxy hummed ponderously along. I, however, couldn't bring myself to consider it that invincible an adversary, even though I knew it could restore itself. Why, you ask? Because of my knowledge from my previous life. I've heard that if you burn the stump where its head was cut off, it won't be able to regenerate. I recounted the mythical tale of Hercules. He had fought a Hydra. According to the stories, he used a torch to cauterize the open wounds after beheading it, preventing it from recovering. Honestly, it was just a myth, a story. It didn't have much credibility. It didn't matter to my party members, though. Their reaction was positive.
So that's it. Just burn the open wounds.
We haven't brought any torches along, but it won't be able to reflect magic if we strike it where it's injured.
Guess it's worth a shot.
I had no idea how similar the Hydra of this world was to the one of my previous world. The Hydra in the myths was said to have one immortal head, but perhaps, however unlikely it seemed, we could defeat this one by simply burning all of its heads. I didn't want to be too optimistic, but it was a living creature. Living things could be killed.
Okay, then let's give it a try.
Geese agreed, and with that, our strategy was set. My proposal didn't guarantee success, but then there was no such thing as guaranteed success. Frankly, I felt like our best course of action was returning to the city. While it was true that we'd hardly used any of our supplies, We had a tough enemy before us. Perhaps it would behoove us to prepare for fighting this boss. We could even hire people specifically for fighting a Hydra. I wasn't sure how many swordsmen out there could slice clean through a Hydra's neck, but with the number of adventurers in Rapan, I was sure we could find at least one. But I knew Paul wouldn't allow it. In his current state, if I suggested we turn back now, he might insist on challenging the beast by himself. Plus, even if we did go back, I couldn't foresee us being lucky enough to find items specific to defeating a Hydra or mercenaries for hire. We had a countermeasure. We had the necessary number of people. Thus, we had to proceed to battle.
Hey, Paul, you fine with all this?
Yeah.
That's not much of an answer. You listening? You're the only one that can chop that thing's heads off.
It was possible Ellen Elias and Talhan could damage the creature's scales, but they couldn't cut through them. Paul had to do the chopping, and as the only one who could use voiceless magic, I had to be the one to cauterize the open wound. Role division was necessary here. Depending on the situation, I might even have to close the distance and do it from melee range. Although I would be targeting the stub of its remaining neck, there was a high chance that the scales surrounding it would nullify my magic. If that happened, the others would have to act as a decoy to divert attacks that came at me. Roxy would heal them if they took any damage. That was how we split up our roles. That was how it had to be. Of course, attacks would still inevitably come my way. I was in a very precarious position.
Shh, you, Ellen Elise, Tallhand, Geese, and Roxy, you've all helped me out up till now. Years have passed since the displacement incident. You crossed the demon continent for me, searched out Rudy in the Northern Territories for me, went to lengths I couldn't even begin to dream of.
All four watched him quietly, in a way that seemed to say, hurry up and spit it out already.
But now that's over, we'll either save her, or, assuming she's not alive, at least all of my family will be accounted for. This is the end. Please lend me your strength this one last time.
All four chuckled and nodded.
It's not your style to act so humble, but I understand. I'll give this all I have.
There's not an idiot here who'd say no after coming this far.
You sure have calmed down over the years. Well, not like I'll be much help, but I'll still do what I can.
Let's win this. We'll be rewarded for our efforts once we claim victory.
Moved by their words, Paul seemed to choke back tears, sniffling. But he didn't let us see him cry. Instead, he turned to me.
Rudy, you really are reliable, son.
You can flatter me after we defeat the Hydra.
It's not flattery, I really do mean it. I can't be as calm as you. I can't come up with ideas either. I'm just an idiot who runs in there head first without thinking. I'm a terrible father. Can't even set a good example for my son.
His voice was thick with conviction. He was staring hard at me, eyes so focused it felt like he was glaring daggers into me. Determination, that was the word. Paul was full of determination.
With that in mind, I'm going to say this to you. I know this isn't something a parent should say, but I'm going to say it anyway.
All right, I said, matching his gaze. I could already guess what he wanted to say, more or less.
Save your mother, even if it kills you.
This was a father talking to his son. Even if it kills you, that certainly wasn't something a parent should say. At the very least, it would have been better if he'd said, I'll save her even if it kills me. Still, I didn't think he was a cruel father for saying it. This was his conviction, his trust in me. Paul intended what he said. He would save her even if it cost him his life. And he thought of me as an equal. He believed in me. He saw me as an adult. That was why he said what he did. All that remained was for me to respond. We were going to save Zenith. To that end, Paul and I would share the same determination. Yeah! I gave a sharp nod, and Paul bobbed his head in return. I couldn't be sure, but I thought he looked happy.
Okay, let's get going then,
he said, rousing everyone to their feet. Our rematch with the Hydra was about to begin. Chapter 9, Mortal Combat. The Hydra made for an imposing figure waiting for us in that spacious room. Behind it was a magically imbued crystal. There wasn't a shadow of a doubt in my mind that it was indeed Zenith who was sealed within.
Okay, let's do this.
Paul dashed ahead. He crouched low to the ground like a dog, moving like the wind at a speed that left the rest of us in the dust. Except this time, Elenile stuck right behind him. Behind her was the slow-legged Talhand. We matched his pace as we advanced. Geese was on standby behind us. He would be useless in this fight, considering he had no way to deal damage. Still, he remained. His duty was to escape and tell the others what had happened if our party failed and was wiped out. Paul reached the Hydra. In the same instant, 3 of its heads moved to strike. The beast was quick for its size, agile and nimble enough that each of its heads looked like wild snakes as they moved. But then Paul blurred, and in that instant, he sliced right through one of the creature's necks. Okay, this is it! Fireball. I lifted my staff and poured all the mana I could within, packing the flames with heat before launching them at the Hydra. But it was futile. The closer the fireball drew to its target, the more it shrank in size. It evaporated the instant it hit. The only thing it left behind was that unpleasant screech, like nails on glass. Guess I'll have to get up close and launch it directly. I'd have to slam my fire magic into it at melee range to cauterize the stumps of its necks.
Just like we planned. Rudy, can you do it?
I've got this. It's not like magic is the only thing I've been practicing. Even as I assured, my heart hammered. I wasn't good in melee. All my memories of close combat were tainted with defeat, starting with Paul, then Ghislaine, then Eris, and finally Ruichard. Never had I been able to beat any of them at close range. Sure, I'd won battles before against Linnea, Persina, and Luke. There were others whom I'd bested with the help of my Eye of Foresight, too. But could any of them have beaten a Hydra? No, I didn't see how they could, not when Paul and Elenilus were both struggling. It was illogical to think I could win against it either. But I wasn't fighting alone this time. I had a team. Paul, Elenise, and Roxy were all with me. I didn't know the extent of Talan's power, but if he was at all comparable to the others, he would prove useful as well. I moved as swift as I could, coming up just behind Paul.
Rudy, you stay right behind me.
To his right was Elenilus, and to his left, Talhand. Behind us, Roxy. This was precisely the Imperial Cross formation. All at once, 3 of its heads came snapping toward us. The Hydra didn't move more than 4 of them at a time. Perhaps that was the extent of its ability to attack, or maybe it was simply that any more heads than that would get in each other's way? I wasn't sure, but this was good news for us.
Grah!
Elenise parried one head while Talhand deflected another. Paul cut off the third, which dropped to the ground, writhing.
Go!
Yeah! Paul bellowed the command at me, and I approached the wriggling stump, launching my magic at it. The flames licked upward, illuminating the area as it scorched the opened wound. The meat on its neck sizzled, turning a charred black. How's that? I inched back to observe my work, but it was too early to tell. Before I could confirm anything, other heads came whirring at us. Paul blocked one, and Elenise deflected the other with her shield. In the corner of my vision, I caught a spray of blood coming from Talhand.
Coo!
Let this divine power be as satisfying nourishment. Healing.
Roxy ran to the dwarf's aid the moment he took the blow and healed his wounds. They were all working to shield me from injury. It was left up to me to check whether my flames had been effective or not. How was the wound on its neck? Would the carbonized stump regenerate? Okay. It hadn't. The wound was just as Paul had left it. The meat and flesh wouldn't knit back together as it had before. It's effective.
Hell yeah!
Paul whooped before cutting off the next one. I burned that one, too. The heat from it was incredible, choking the air around me. Even Paul had sweat dripping down his brow. But if I didn't put the necessary firepower behind these attacks, I wouldn't be able to cauterize the wounds. If left half-toasted, the creature would regenerate. As long as we kept up at this pace... Cover me. My Eye of Foresight predicted the Hydra's movement. 2 of the heads that hadn't previously moved will come straight my way. I could evade the one, but the other head would predict that motion and aim accordingly.
Leave it to me.
As I dodged the first, she flew in beside me. She knocked one head away while planting herself uncomfortably between me and the monster, shoving her shield out in front with a screech of grinding metal in order to protect me. A drop of blood splattered against my cheek. Roxy, healing!
Let this divine power be a satisfying nourishment. Healing.
She immediately leaped into action with her restoration magic. Then the two moved back to their original positions, as if nothing had ever happened.
Rudy, I'm going for the third.
Got it! A pillar of red liquid sprayed through the air as another head came crashing before me. Burn! My job was to burn its flesh, to do nothing more than burn anything else I could leave to the others. Right now, I just had to concentrate on what was before me. Paul cut, I burned. Elenize and Talhand would make absolutely certain I was protected, and Roxy would heal them if she needed to. We burned the fourth head. We can do this. Suddenly, the Hydra's movements changed. The remaining 5 heads moved simultaneously, going after Talhand.
Tarland!
He evaded the first one. Since he couldn't do the same for the second, he dropped to the ground and rolled, trying to escape it instead. As soon as he did, its scales clipped him and his heavy armor went flying, clattering as tumbled across the ground. His butt was planted firmly on the ground by the time he blocked the third with his axe. As for the fourth, he couldn't even defend himself. It snapped at his feet. In seconds, Talhand was suspended in midair.
Whoa.
The fifth swooped in, jaws bared, threatening to snap his torso in two as he dangled helplessly. Then, a low boom resounded as a head hit the floor. The tragic fleshy stump of a dwarf's neck was nowhere to be found. It was the Hydra's head that had been lost. Paul had sawed it off.
Sorry about that. Thanks for the help.
I'll burn it now.
Let this divine power be a satisfying nourishment. Healing.
Talhand's voice, then mine and Roxy's, respectively. All 3 of them could be heard simultaneously, all taking different actions. I burned 2 of its stumps at the same time. There were only 3 left. It was then that the Hydra's movements changed once more. The creature was beginning to stagger back, as if frightened by us.
We can do this. I'm going to press the attack, Rudy.
Paul leaped forward, but my legs were frozen. Wait, wasn't this a trap? I had a feeling we shouldn't attack when we had no idea what our enemy might be scheming. That ill premonition drifted through my head within seconds. And in the next instant... What? It was one of the Hydra's heads. Unbelievable, it was chomping off the burned stumps of its own flesh.
What the hell?
And as we watched, meat and bone knitted back together. Shit! The cauterized wounds couldn't heal, but they would go right back to normal if the Hydra managed to chomp them back open.
Don't give it a chance to regenerate.
Yeah, I lay before thee a cradle of ice as thou desire. Now relinquish thy glacial currents, ice smash.
Elenilis let out a fierce cry and swept toward it. She closed the distance, then thrust her gladius at one of the heads that was beginning to heal. She chanted, slamming her magic into the regrowing stump at point-blank range. The scales had yet to grow back, so the block of ice burst right through the soft meat. Handfuls of blood went splattering like pomegranates as the head or what remained of the neck, anyways within pain. Roxy.
Let this smouldering flame burn bright with your blessing, flamethrower.
Roxy, who had caught up to Elenilis at some point, unleashed a roaring blaze. While the scales were able to absorb the force of her spell to some degree, she still managed to sear the flesh, smoke hissing from the wound.
We did it!
Paul moved to pursue, but the Hydra didn't retreat. It lifted its enormous body, stretching its heads, all 3 of them, just short of the ceiling, and glowered down at us. Was it really frightened? No, it didn't seem like it. What was this? It felt familiar, dangerous.
Something's coming. Watch out.
Yeah. My body moved on instinct, no experience. I'd seen a dragon rear up like that before, going back on its haunches, drawing in air. It's going to breathe something. Everyone come over to me, please.
Got it.
Paul retreated a step, returning to where I was. Elenise and Talhand came running, almost tumbling to the base of my feet. Roxy leaped toward me with her arms spread, as if to grab on. I conjured a wall of water as thick as I could. At almost the same instant, the creature exhaled. Tremendous flames burst out of 3 of the Hydra's mouths, plummeting down toward us, crashing into my water barrier. Enormous plumes of steam rolled out, heating the whole room. Dragon breath was renowned for its fearsome heat. It could melt right through steel or evaporate a small bog in an instant. And just now, 3 of those heads had expelled that very breath. An ordinary magician alone couldn't have defended against it. If 5 no, 10 of them joined together to erect a water barrier, then no, even that might not be enough. Fortunately, my mana wasn't ordinary. Father.
Yeah.
After the creature lowered its heads, Paul sprang forward. The Hydra's breath had limited uses. Whether it was creating it through some organ in its body, or whether it had to store up mana, I had no idea. I just knew it couldn't fire it in rapid succession. This had to be its trump card, something it could unleash with 3 heads at the same time, with downtime between. Perhaps if only 1 head had fired, then one of the others might be able to use the same ability in succession. But it hadn't done that, most likely to avoid catching its other heads in the attack. Either way, this was our chance.
Hiya.
Paul swept his blade down, ripping through another neck. I burned it instantly. Just 2 more to go, a thick neck and a slender one. Was the conspicuously chunky one its main head? If so, we should leave it for last. Father, let's go for the thinner one first.
I know.
Paul rushed forth. Elenise and Talhand would deal with the thicker one. Things were much easier now that there was only 2 of them left.
Grah!
His sword danced and the head came falling. My flames immediately seared its raw flesh. We can do this. There was just 1 left. We'd won this. After coming this far, we wouldn't give it the chance to recover. Even if its final head were immortal, we could easily deal with it now that the others were gone. It was then, just as I was using my magic to cauterize the second to last stump, that the Hydra's body trembled. I didn't know what that movement meant. I could see it with my eye of foresight, but I didn't understand it. The creature was too big.
You moron.
Wait.
Before I realized what was happening, Paul had slammed me out of the way. Something enormous came crashing down right in front of my eyes. But it didn't have a head anymore? No, there was no head, but it did still have a neck. The Hydra was slinging its headless necks around like spiked whips, all 8 of them. Every one of them was coated in tough scales that could shred flesh like a cheese grater. It whipped those necks around all at once, mowing down anything in the vicinity. Paul screamed, driving his foot into me to kick me out of the way. Almost simultaneously, a thud resounded as something smashed to the ground right where I'd been a moment ago, in the once empty space that had existed between Paul and me. Whoa! Whoa! Horns jutted from the creature's forehead. An eye glared at me. A panicked, cornered eye. One trying desperately to survive, to cling to the tiny strand of life that remained. The Hydra's eye. Grah! Moving on instinct, I plunged my left hand down into its eye. I could hear a squish, like a grate popping, as a fierce heat consumed my arm. The Hydra blinked from the pain, its scale-covered eyelid coming crashing down like a guillotine. In the next instant, I launched my stone cannon. The top part of the Hydra's head was blown off as its eyelid clamped down. The force of the collision jerked my arm up into the air. A tear and then a vicious snap too, sounds that penetrated so deep in my ears they seemed to claw their way to my brain. Araxie! I choked back the pain as I screamed out her name, the name of my trusted master.
Let this smouldering flame burn bright with your blessing, flamethrower.
Her voice, though faint, reached me. The final head fell, charred black from the fire. Then its enormous body slowly began to collapse. A boom thundered around us as it crumpled. I could feel the life gradually drain out of it. There would be no further regeneration. Its final head was not immortal. Ha! Ha! We beat it! We actually beat it! We won! We did it! The second I realized it was over, sharp pain came shooting up from my left hand. When I looked down, I was shocked. My left hand was gone. The scales of the Hydra's eyelid had sliced right through skin and muscle, its ferociously strong muscles snapping my bones apart. Then, in the last moment when it had raised its head, it ripped the whole thing off. Blood was spewing from my open artery. My hand, my left hand. In its eye. My hand, it was in the monster's eye, I realized. I glanced over at the head. The raw power of Roxy's fire magic had left it a clump of charcoal. The moment I saw that, I knew. My left hand was gone. I could search for it, but I wouldn't find it. I would bleed out if I even tried. Crap. I needed healing. Fast. Angel of miracles, bestow thy holy breath under the pulsing heart before thee. O heavens blessed with sunlight, servants who despise crimson, swoop down into the ocean of light, the pure white of thy wings spread wide. Drive away the blood thou seest before thee. Shine healing. I recited an advanced tier incantation. Advanced alone would not be able to restore what was lost. I knew that. I used it anyways. Pink flesh swelled over the amputated stump, ceasing the blood flow. Disappearing along with it were the scratch on my face and the bruise from where Paul had kicked me. My breathing was erratic. Calm down, I told myself, calm down. My left hand was gone, but the Hydra had been an incredibly difficult foe. I'd gotten through it with all but my left hand. Put that way, perhaps it was a small price to pay. If Paul hadn't managed to squeeze in there and save me, there was a high likelihood I would have died. You really saved me there, Father. I glanced over my shoulder, searching for him. There was no response. Everyone was quiet. Ellen and Elias just stood there. Talon was silent. Roxy pursed her lips, and behind them Geese was pale as a sheet. Paul gave no reply. Father? They were all looking at something, so I followed their gaze to where Paul was, collapsed on the ground. Yes, collapsed. There, on his back. But he wasn't just collapsed. He was unconscious. His eyes were vacant, and his lower body was missing. Huh? What? Oh no. I knew what had happened. That's right. I'd seen it myself. Paul had kicked me out of the way because the spot where I'd stood was exactly where the last head came slamming down. He'd had to kick me as hard as he could to be able to move me. I wasn't a child anymore, so he had to, thrust his lower body forward for the kick to have power behind it. Normally that kind of kick would send a person reeling back from the recoil, but Paul was a swordsman. A skilled one who could wrap themselves in battle aura, one with physical strength. So when he kicked me, his body didn't move. That meant that the place where I was at, the place, I didn't want to understand it. But the moment I strangled out those words, Paul's eyes moved, landing on me. I met his gaze. Paul said nothing. His mouth just softened as if relaxed, as if expelling a sigh of relief, and blood gurgled up past his lips. Then the light went out in his eyes. Paul was dead. Chapter 10, Parents. In the exact moment that the Hydra breathed its last, the magically imbued crystal it had been guarding liquefied, and Zenith collapsed onto the ground. She was alive. Although still unconscious, there was no mistake that she was breathing. There were dozens of enormous magically imbued crystals in the area, and the ground was littered with the magic stones that had comprised the creature's scales. Further within were a plethora of fallen magic items too. They would net a fine price, but not one of us was in a mood to start collecting them. I felt light, unsteady, as if I were in a dream. If someone called out to me, I would reply, but my mind was otherwise empty. It was almost as if someone else was answering for me, using my mouth. Yet, much to my own surprise, I was able to make short work of the unfinished tasks that remained afterward. We cremated Paul's body there in that room. My feelings about it were complicated. Part of me wanted to take him home, to at least let Zenith see his face even though he'd passed. But in the end, I followed everyone's recommendation for his funeral. My fire magic was enough to reduce him to bones in a matter of minutes. When Elenice warned that burying him like that could result in him reanimating as a skeleton, I did as she proposed. I crushed the bones down, conjured a jar with my earth magic, and poured themselves, both there as parted. He'd left only 3 personal belongings: the metal breastplate that had protected his torso, the magical sword that could deal massive damage to tough opponents, and finally his favorite weapon that he'd kept at his side since before I was even born. I felt strange. I couldn't put my finger on what this emotion was, but it felt like a weight crushing down on my chest. Let's go home. I wasn't very useful on the way back. We beat our enemies and I was able to use my magic, but my feet were unsteady. It was as if I wasn't walking at all, but rather floating. Had it not been for Roxy, who was pressed close beside me, I might have stepped on a teleportation trap. No matter how many mistakes I made, no one said a word to me. Not Elenize, not Roxy, not Talonhand, and not Geese. No complaints, no consolations. Everyone was at a loss for words. Zenith was carried the whole way on someone's back. There were some intense battles as we hiked up to the surface, but she never woke. It made me anxious, but the fact that she was still breathing meant she was alive. At least, that was what I tried to tell myself. It took us 3 days to make it out of the labyrinth. I couldn't really remember what the 3 who welcomed us back to the city said when we arrived, but Elenilis and Gies explained the specifics to them. Shiera collapsed in tears, and Viera sank to her knees with a look of shock. Even as I saw that, I couldn't say anything. Not a single word. Lilia was different. Her face was a mask, revealing nothing as she looked at me and squeezed her arms around me.
It must have been difficult. You did well. Try to get some rest and leave everything else to me.
Feeling utterly empty, I just nodded. I shed my robe once we returned to the inn. There was a hole in the shoulder, one I knew I needed to stitch closed. But for now, I just tossed it to the corner of the room, along with my staff and my equipment bag. I tossed it all into a pile. Then I collapsed onto my bed. That night, I had a dream. In it, I was back in my old body, back to being the slow-witted, self-demeaning shut-in. But this time, the man-god was nowhere to be found. Nor was the White Room, in which he always resided. This was a memory from my previous life. Yes, a dream of what had once been. I wasn't sure exactly when it took place, but the scenery looked familiar. It was the living room of my parents' house. The 2 of them were there talking about me. I couldn't hear their voices, perhaps because it was only a dream. Yet strangely, I knew it was me they were talking about. Had they been worried about me back then? I left that world without ever discovering the reason for their deaths. Considering they'd both gone at the same time, I assumed illness. Maybe an accident, or perhaps suicide. I wondered what they'd thought of me just before they died. Did they consider me nothing more than a shameless shut-in? Were they vexed by how I turned out? Ashamed? I had no idea how they truly felt. My mother would still pop in to see me occasionally, but at some point my father had stopped saying anything to me. Did I even cross their mind when they died, I wondered? Mushoku Tensei Vol12 by Ryfujin Magonat. Cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit artale.ai and use promotion code ARTALE to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story. What about me? When they died, I didn't even go to their funeral. What was I doing? I didn't pick their bones from the ash after cremation, like a child should have done. What the hell was I doing? Why didn't I even go to their funeral? I'd been scared of the way people would look at me when they saw I wasn't even trying to be sad. Of the way they would look at a piece of shit like me, a shut-in, their hostility, their contempt. But that wasn't the whole story, of course. I wasn't an honorable human being. At the time, I didn't feel even an ounce of sadness that my parents had passed. I didn't love them enough to grieve their absence. I was less worried about losing them, and more concerned by thoughts of, oh shit. Now, what am I going to do? I couldn't even look directly at my own future. I didn't mean to justify my behavior, of course, but I also couldn't help it. Imagine being backed into a corner, losing the last source of salvation you have, being suddenly plunged into a vast ocean before you'd even had a chance to fill your lungs with air. Anyone placed in that situation would look for a way to escape from reality. Sure, I regretted not doing more, but I could only blame myself so much. Still, if nothing else, shouldn't I have at least attended their funeral? I had no idea what I'd been thinking back then, but shouldn't I have at least looked at their faces after they'd passed? Shouldn't I have at least picked up their bones? How had Paul looked after he passed? It hadn't been satisfaction written on his face, but I did see the edges of his lips curl in a smile of relief. What was it he'd tried to say there at the end? What expression had my parents from my previous life worn on their faces when they passed? Why didn't I look back then? I wished I could go back now and see. I felt awful the next day when I awoke. An intense desire to do absolutely nothing weighed down my entire body. In order to escape from the feeling, I forced myself out of bed and moved to the neighboring room where Lilia and Zenith were. When she spotted me, Lilia stared in amazement.
Lord Rudeus, you've recovered already?
Yeah, for the moment. I can't be the only one to take it easy, right?
I'm certain no one would complain if you were to rest a bit more.
Honestly, I did want to crawl back into bed as she suggested, but the sense that I had to do something, had to move, was even stronger. Please, let me stay here.
All right, I understand. Feel free to sit.
In the end, I stayed there, and the two of us watched over Zenith together. She'd been sleeping for days by now. It had taken 3 days to leave the labyrinth, a day to get back to town, and even now she didn't wake. Her outward appearance suggested nothing unusual. She merely looked like she was sleeping, and though she'd been bedridden for days, there was no sign that she was losing weight. She looked perfectly healthy. I thought she might look a bit older, but that wasn't the case. Both her cheeks and hands were warm, and if you pressed your ear close to her lips, you could hear her breathing. It was just her eyes that wouldn't open. Maybe she would stay like this forever. Perhaps her body would deteriorate and she would die. That thought briefly passed through my mind. I didn't give voice to it. Unnecessary words were better left unsaid. Lilia and I watched over her quietly. Occasionally, Vieira and Sierra would come by, chatting about this or that. Whatever the conversation was, it didn't stay in my head. The two of us shared meals together, though I had little sense of even being hungry. I'd barely swallowed anything. I tried to wash what I could down with water, but the food stuck to my throat and made me gag. It wasn't until early afternoon that Zenith showed any signs of change. There, right in front of us, she let out a small groan and slowly lifted her eyes open. Those present were Lilia, Vieira, and myself. Vieira immediately burst out the door to go inform the others. Lilia and I remained, watching as Zenith tried to lift herself up. It should have been difficult after being bedridden for days, but with a bit of assistance from Lilia, Zenith was able to lift her upper body almost entirely on her own.
Good morning, my lady.
Zenith regarded her with the face of someone who hadn't completely shaken off sleep yet. Her voice, it was a voice I recognized. Thinking back, it was the same one I'd heard the first moment I was born into this world. A calming one. Relief washed over me. Paul had died, but at least the person he'd tried to rescue was now safe. Safe and alive. His hopes had been realized. I was sure she'd be sad when she learned of his death. She might even cry. Still, at least the three of us, Lilia included, could share that loss together. Mother, I didn't have to tell her about it right now. I could save that until things calmed down a bit more and she understood what was going on. We could take things slowly, one step at a time. It wouldn't be wise to force the harshness of reality on her all at once. First, we needed to rejoice that she was alive and that we'd finally been reunited. We could be sad later. I stilled my heart. She had forgotten me. I couldn't blame her. The same had happened with Roxy. As the days and months turned into years, my face had changed. It might be a bit of a shock to her now, but I was sure we would both laugh about it in the years to come.
My lady, this is Lord Rudeus. 10 years have passed since you last saw him.
Zenith stared at me vacantly. Then she looked back at Lilia, her eyes like a mirror empty, reflecting only what they saw before them. She tilted her head again and Lilia's eyes went wide. Something was wrong. Strange she wasn't speaking. All she did was groan. Plus, the way she moved Dashit was as if she'd forgotten Lilia as well. It was one thing to forget me, but could she truly not recognize Lilia? The maid had aged admittedly, but she hadn't changed that much. Her hair and even her clothes were the same as before. Her voice was clumsy, her eyes were blank, and she could form no words. All she did was stare at us.
My lady, could it be that?
It seemed Lilia had realized it too. I knew what words lay unspoken, hanging at the end of her unfinished sentence. But my heart was quick to dismiss them. Both of us tried numerous times to talk to her. The conclusion came quickly. Zenith reacted to our voices, but produced no words of her own, nor did she show any signs of comprehending what we said.
Lord Rudeus, I'm afraid she's lost it all.
Indeed. Zenith had lost everything. Her memory, her knowledge, her intelligence, all the necessary components that formed a person. She was a husk. There was no way she remembered Paul. She didn't even know Lilia or me. Who, what, when, how, she recalled none of it. That meant she couldn't even be sad he'd died. We couldn't share that loss. The reality of that stabbed like a knife. And my heart shattered. How many days passed after that? I had only a vague sense of time. I woke, slept, woke, slept. Repeated the process countless times. When I slept, my dreams replayed the moment of Paul's death. I saw him slash at the Hydra, saw it swing its neck, felt him shove me aside, pushing me out of the way, then watched him move again, watched the Hydra move again, but I couldn't move. Paul kicked me out of the way, and I watched as the Hydra's head came plummeting down in front of me. Then I jolted awake, checked to make sure it was just a dream, and huddled back into bed. I didn't have the willpower to get up. All I could do was think about Paul. Paul was, sure, okay, he wasn't a praiseworthy human. He was terrible with women and a total show-off. He was weak in the face of adversity and looked to alcohol for an escape. He hadn't even bothered to say anything fatherly before we went into battle. By most standards, he was a complete failure as a father, but still, I loved him. It wasn't quite the same as the parent and child love Paul felt for me. To me, Paul was more like a partner in crime. Strictly speaking, I was mentally older, but he had more physical years on me. Even when it came to life experience, he was probably well ahead of me when you considered the decades I'd spent as a shut-in. None of that really mattered. Age was pointless. When I talked to Paul, I felt like the two of us were on an even footing. I couldn't see him as a father, and I'd probably never really thought of myself as his child. But Paul was different. He'd seen me as his child from the very beginning. Me, who'd been a piece of shit 30-something recluse on the inside at the time. Me, whose actions thus far had to have been bizarre from an outside perspective. Still, he regarded me as family, never turning his eyes away. There were areas where he failed as a father, but he never faltered in considering me family. Never once did he treat me like a stranger. I was always his son. Despite my abnormal abilities, he still saw me as his son. He faced me head on. He was a father. He always had been. Even as he carried burdens far too heavy for him, he acted as a father and continued to do things for the sake of our family. At the end, he'd even shielded me, used his body as a father to protect me. His son, he bravely put his life on the line as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and he died. It was strange. I wasn't even his child, but Paul was still my father. Paul had 2 real children, not fakes like me, actual, honest to God, real children, 2 sweet, genuine daughters, Norn and Aisha. If he were going to shield anyone, it should have been them. Plus, he had 2 wives, right? He'd spent years desperately searching for one of them, Zenith. The other, Lilia, had been there to support him until then. 2 wives and 2 daughters, 4 people in total. What the hell are you doing leaving them behind, huh, Paul? Were they important to you? But maybe I was just as important to him, too. 2 wives, 2 daughters, and 1 son. Maybe they were all equally important to him. I'd never seen him as a father, but he thought of me as one of the most important people in his life. Ah, fuck. Why, Paul, give me a break. You said it so many times. Rudy, I see you as an adult now. I see you as a man. I got married, bought a house, took guardianship of my sisters. Of course I felt like an adult. I came to help you, worked hard in that labyrinth. I saw myself as an adult. You did too, didn't you? That was why you said what you did at the end, right? Save her, even if it kills you. So, explain to me why. What am I supposed to say to Norn and Aisha when I go home? How am I supposed to explain what happened? What am I supposed to do with Zenith, the way she is now? What am I supposed to do from here on out? Tell me, Paul. You were supposed to decide this, weren't you? Damn it. Why did you have to go and die? Ah, fuck. At least if I had died, it would be him here anguishing over what to do instead. Or better yet, if neither of us had died. No one would have to suffer. Ah, I can't do it. Sadness bubbled up with me. I couldn't stop the tears that came flooding out. In my life, my previous one, that is, I didn't even cry when my mother and father had died. I hadn't even felt sad. Now that Paul was dead, the tears came naturally. I was sad. I couldn't believe it. The one person who had to be here, was supposed to be here, was now gone. Paul was a father. Paul was my father. I'd never thought of him as one, and yet he was every bit apparent to me as the ones from my previous life. I thought and thought, cried and cried, until I was exhausted. I don't want to do anything. I lounged lazily about my room. There were things I needed to do, I knew, but I couldn't find the will to do them. I didn't even have the strength to leave this room. I slept, woke, sat up, adjusted my posture, and let time just slip by. Elanias and Lilia came to visit in the midst of this. They said something to me, but I wasn't sure what. It was almost as if they were speaking a foreign language and my brain couldn't comprehend the words. Not that it mattered. I wouldn't have been able to reply even if I did. I had nothing to say, no words to speak to them. If, just maybe, if I had been able to wield a sword a little better, then I could have chopped off the Hydra's head. Maybe then Paul wouldn't have died. The two of us could have worked on chopping while Roxy roasted the open wounds. We could have defeated it easily if we had done that, right? If only I could wrap a battle ore around myself. If only I could move a little faster. Then Paul wouldn't have had to shield me. I could have dodged the attack all on my own. But I couldn't, and that's why things had ended up this way. It wasn't like I hadn't tried. Maybe we should have gone back to the city, even if it meant I had to punch his face in and drag him back. We could have come back, had a calm strategy meeting, and then maybe we could have come up with a solid plan. A smart one, not the clumsy, by the seat of your pants plan that we'd used. If we'd done anything just a bit differently, the outcome might have changed, too. But it was too late. Paul was dead. I'd never see him again, just like the parents of my previous life. No matter what I said now, it was already too late. Chapter 11. Looking Ahead. 4 people, men and women, gathered around a table in a certain pub. A darkness settled over them amidst the clamor of the room.
Paul's dead.
Yeah, sure is.
He protected his boy. That's how he'd have wanted to go.
His voice held little energy. He should have been drowning himself in his beloved alcohol by now, but he didn't look the least bit drunk.
Don't think he'd be happy, not with Zenith like that.
The dwarf just silently tipped his tankard back. It had been a shock to them all when Zenith turned out to be an empty husk, an especially cruel shock, considering they'd all known the cheerful, energetic person she'd been before the accident. Even so, they were adventurers. Death was always close at hand. They would have had the capacity to accept it even if she died.
She's alive, right? Who knows? Maybe she can be healed?
Though it was clear he didn't have much hope of that. There were stories, occasionally, of people who were crippled by a monster's poison. Never once in those stories had such people recovered. Once the mind was gone, nothing could heal them, not even God-tier healing magic. If something went wrong with someone's mind, there was no way to fix it.
Even if she's able to somehow walk and talk again, her memories won't return.
What's that? Sure talking like you know a lot on the matter, Elanias.
I'm just telling it like it is.
Elanias didn't explain any further. She had lived a long life longer than either Talhand or Geese. She'd said she'd seen a similar case before. It was likely she did know something, but whatever it wasn't going to give them any hope of Zenith recovering, so Talhand didn't press the issue.
The real problem is the boy.
Yeah!
Rudeus, Paul's son, had spent almost a week now cooped up in his room.
It's not just that the kid's under the weather, it goes deeper than that.
It's almost like he's a husk, too.
Rudeus didn't even reply when they tried to talk to him. He just nodded, a vacant look in his eyes, and said, "Yeah."
Rudy was very attached to Mr. Paul.
Roxy Magurdia had been relatively silent until the topic turned to Rudeus. In the back of her mind, she pictured a young Rudeus taking sword lessons from Paul. No matter how Paul beat him into the ground, Rudeus would stand back up again and continue swinging, an indignant look on his face. He'd been the embodiment of talent. To Roxy, it had looked like he was truly enjoying learning swordsmanship from his father, a blinding source of envy to her given that she'd never shared such moments with her own parents.
Well, I understand how the boss feels, but it's going to be bad if things stay this way.
I must agree.
Rudeus hadn't eaten since the day it happened. Even when those around him prompted him to try, he just said, sure, but showed no signs of following through. He did seem to be doing the minimum of at least drinking water, but he was growing more gaunt by the day. His eyes were sunken and his cheeks had grown hollow. He looked like he had the shadow of death on his face. If left to his own devices, it wouldn't be surprising if he actually joined Paul. Everyone present thought as much.
I'd like to do something to try to cheer him up.
Geese's gaze traveled to Elenalize.
Didn't you always say it was important to get lucky at times like these?
I can't help him with getting lucky.
Roxy was the only one who didn't understand what they were talking about.
What is it you can't do?
Geese and Talhand exchanged looks and pursed their lips.
Miss Elenalize, do you have some kind of plan?
No, I don't.
Well, how should I put it? Well, in times like these, it's best to just enjoy yourself to the fullest and try to forget.
Enjoy yourself?
Men are straightforward. Give them some alcohol, a woman to bed, and they'll get that rush of joy from being alive. Bring a little bit of energy back to them. I mean, yeah, it's not going to return them to how they were, but still.
Ah. Oh. All right, I get it now. Double. All right. I guess you're right. That's just how men are. Yeah.
Her cheeks flushed red and her gaze floated to her lap. Men liked to bed women when they were depressed. She felt sure she'd heard that story once before. It was true for mercenaries in particular, who liked to pay for women's services before and after battle in order to distract themselves from their own fear. After completing a mission where their life had been on the line, many men visited the brothels. But when Roxy thought of Rudeus and Elenalize together,
Elenalize, you've always said for as long as I can remember that you re good at consoling men with wounded hearts.
I have?
Roxy began to think. It was true that Elenalize had a talent for that type of thing. She had daily relations with an undeterminable number of men, and Roxy had heard she was incredibly skilled at what she did. Surely it was possible for a woman with that level of experience to get Rudeus back on his feet again. The thought made her gloomy, but what else could they do?
How unusual. Normally you'd be all over someone in the kind of state boss is in right now.
Roxy couldn't stand seeing Rudeus the way he was right now. Elenalize felt the same. She wanted to help him, to console him. But she also knew what would happen once they returned home if she succumbed and used his broken heart as an excuse to go to bed with him. She would be betraying Cliff, betraying Sylphie. Even Rudeus wouldn't be able to cope with that.
Even I have people that I can't bed.
Why not Rudy? You know how much he's suffering.
Because the person he married his wife is my granddaughter.
Huh? What? Rudy's married?
Yes, he is, and his child will be born soon.
Oh, so... It's true. Well... I mean, of course it is. Rudy's that age already.
Roxy couldn't fully mask how shaken she was as she bent down to retrieve the fallen tankard. She brought it to her lips without thinking before she remembered she'd spilled it all and ordered another.
I'd like the strongest alcohol you have.
Her eyes swiveled as she folded her arms over her chest. Marriage. That's right. Even Rudeus could get married. Yeah, it was normal. At least, that was what she tried to tell herself. Then Roxy remembered how she'd acted in the Labyrinth, and she gritted her teeth. She'd made advances on him, thinking he was single. Rudeus had been receptive on a level she'd never experienced before, but perhaps the only reason he hadn't rejected her outright was because she was an acquaintance. From the sidelines, it must have looked hysterical, the most entertaining buffoonery. Roxy wanted to scream at them. Why didn't anyone tell me? But the complaint remained lodged in her throat. Anyway, her feelings weren't what mattered right now.
Still, even if he is married, this is an emergency. Couldn't you both be forgiven for doing it just once?
Roxy didn't even understand the words coming out of her mouth. She just felt strongly that they had to do something to pick Rudeus back up.
Perhaps, but I can't be the one to do it.
Roxy couldn't understand the emotion in the elf's voice or the frustration visible on her face.
Sorry for the wait.
Ah, thank you.
Conveniently, her drink arrived. Roxy knocked it back and swallowed the whole thing down. It burned, passing down her parched throat and spreading through her body like a wildfire. It probably tasted particularly delicious to her right now because her body was craving alcohol.
Besides, Rudeus and I have already... Well, even though I can't help, Geese can drag him along to a brothel, right?
Not so sure about that. You really think Rudeus will cheer up having sex with some girl he doesn't know?
Well, what he needs right now is to be able to lean on someone he trusts.
So, Lilia?
She shot a glare at Geese.
This is exactly...
Okay, I get it. Don't get so pissy.
Eleanor's feelings about the matter were complicated. She didn't want to intrude on his marriage to Sylphie, but she did want to help Rudeus. If she betted him, she could get him back on his feet. Eleanor was confident about that. This wasn't the first or even second time she'd been in a situation like this, where she'd helped a man heal the wounds in his heart, but she also couldn't help but think that to do so now would be a disastrous choice she could never take back. She was conflicted. Normally, she didn't mind being the one to get her hands dirty. Eleanor had played that role numerous times, but her desire to not betray Cliff got in the way this time. She simply couldn't. Silence hung in the air. Only the quiet sounds of people downing their drinks lingered. None among their motley crew dared speak up. The air was as stale as a funeral.
Anyway, we've got Zenith in the state she's in now, too. I want to get the boss back on his feet quick as possible so we can hightail it out of this town.
At Geese's words, the remaining three sighed.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
They were exhausted as well. After all, it had been 6 years since the displacement incident. A substantial period of time by anyone's estimate, during which they'd traveled from the central continent to the demon continent, from the demon continent to the Begarit continent, then began their venture into the teleportation labyrinth. It had been intense, frequently rough going, but they'd labored through it, both the good times and the bad, with the hope that they'd come out laughing together. The displacement incident had been an unpleasant affair, but the time they'd spent together hadn't been completely awful. Their broken, disconnected party had slowly come back together. Eleanor and Tallhand had teamed up, while Geese hopped into action for Paul. Paul and Tallhand had reconciled their differences. Paul and Eleanor had even fought side by side once more at the very end. None of them had ever dreamed they would come back together like this again. But then, there they were, with Paul at their center. All they had to do was rescue Zenith and locate Ghislaine, wherever she had wandered off to, and they could all share drinks together again. That's what they all thought. But now Paul was dead. It was enough to overwhelm them with an indescribable sense of exhaustion, like everything they'd done had been for naught. It was the kind of exhaustion you felt after you'd spent hours building something, only for it to fall to pieces at the very end. Rudeus wasn't the only one overcome with lethargy.
Don't be so glum. Rudeus is Paul's boy. Might be down in the dumps now, but he'll pick himself back up on his own eventually, no doubt.
I certainly hope you're right.
Both she and Geese nodded vaguely at the dwarf's words. They knew the boy's weakness, but he was already 16. He wasn't a child anymore. The situation might be grim, but he was a remarkable adult at heart. Death visited everyone. It was a particularly close companion to adventurers. Everyone's parents died eventually. Everyone had to deal with this at some point in their lives. That was why, they assumed, Rudeus would also eventually be able to do the same. Only one among them did not nod their head. It was Roxy, her thoughts preoccupied with memories from long ago. I realized it was evening when I looked out the window. I was sitting on my bed, spacing out. How many days had gone by? Did it even matter? As I thought that to myself, a knock suddenly came upon the door.
Rudy, can I have a moment?
When I followed the sound of the voice, I glimpsed Roxy at the entrance. Had I left the door open this entire time? Teacher. It felt like ages since I'd spoken. My voice was hoarse, and I wasn't even sure whether she'd heard me or not. Roxy hastily made her way toward me. Something felt different than usual. I wondered what it was. Ah, that was it. She wasn't in her robe today. Her shirt and pants were separate pieces of thinly woven fabric. That was a rare sight.
Pardon me.
She said stiffly, plopping down on the bed beside me. Several seconds of silence passed. Roxy spoke slowly, as if carefully choosing her words.
Want to go out somewhere with me for a bit of a change of pace?
Huh?
There are many magical items in this city that you wouldn't be able to see on other continents. It might be interesting to take a look at them all, don't you think?
No, I'm not in the mood.
Oh, you're not?
Sorry. Sorry. She was inviting me to go out. I knew it was because she wanted to cheer me up. Normally, I would have followed along behind her like a puppy, but I simply didn't feel like it right now. Silence stretched out between us. Roxy again seemed to choose her words as she spoke.
It's unfortunate what happened with Mr. Paul and Mr. Zenith.
Unfortunate. Unfortunate. Was this really something that could be summed up in that one word? Well, this wasn't her family after all.
I can still remember, in great detail, the 5 of us living together in Buena Village. That might have been the happiest time of my life.
Roxy spoke quietly, gripping my hand. Hers was warm.
As an adventurer, it's not unusual for the people close to you to die. I know that pain. I've experienced it before.
Please don't lie to me. I'd met Roxy's parents before they were alive and well. She might not have seen them for a while, but surely that hadn't changed. Your mother and father are doing just fine, aren't they?
That's true. It's been a few years since I saw them, but they seemed well. I'm sure they still have 100 years ahead of them.
Then you don't understand. Don't throw that word around so casually. A wave of emotion flooded up from my chest and I batted her hand away. I felt the last bit of strength drain out of me as I yelled at her. Roxy, though taken aback, seemed to seriously weigh her next words.
The person who died was someone who formed a party with me and taught me the basics right after I became an adventurer. I wouldn't go as far as to call him a parent, but I did think of him as an older brother.
He died shielding me. Like you, I also anguished over his death. Of course, I don't think it's as bad as what happened to you. Losing your father and finding your mother only for her to be sick, but it did leave me deeply depressed. That's why I think I can understand a little bit, even if it's just a sliver of what you're feeling right now.
Then you don't understand at all. She didn't understand how I felt, having reincarnated, stuck between past and present. I wasn't just saddened by Paul's death, nor was I simply lamenting that Zenith had become a husk. I'd realized something. Ever since I was reincarnated and decided to do it all over, I thought I was doing a good job. But in the end, I'd just been ignoring something important. I'd turned my back on the discord between me and my family in my previous life, kept my eyes averted even after I was reborn. And as a result, I'd made the same mistake a second time in this world. I'd been unable to give anything back to my parents before Paul died and Zenith became a husk. I'd just done the same thing all over again, repeated the same mistake, one I couldn't take back. My previous life of 34 years, my current life of 16 years. 50 years that I'd lived in total, and yet I'd done it again. In my previous life, I'd been hopeless. But when I was reincarnated in this world, I thought I'd changed. Now, I was confronted with the reality that nothing had changed. Things might look good on the surface, but in truth, I'd hardly budged past square one. Getting back on my feet seemed hopeless, honestly. Knowing that Roxy had processed a similar experience and managed to get back on hers did little to reassure me.
I was truly happy during my days in Buena Village. I originally came to the Asura Kingdom wanting to work there, but I couldn't find any jobs.
I decided to take a temporary position in the countryside as a home tutor. But then you were overflowing with talent, and Paul and Zenith treated me so warmly. I think they were the ones who really taught me what the true kindness of a family is. They were like a second family.
She stood up on my bed, slipped behind me, and knelt, wrapping her arms around my head as if cradling me.
Rudy, I think I can share in your sadness.
I felt something soft press against the back of my head. Thump! Thump! Came the gentle pulse of her heart. A soothing sound. Why did listening to it comfort me so? I wondered. Why did it make me feel like things would be okay? The same went for her smell. Roxy's scent was relaxing too. Up until now, whenever I faced anything difficult, it had been strangely comforting to remember this smell and the things she taught me. When I'd been in the grips of my ED, just thinking about Roxy had been enough to help me endure. Why was that? The answer hung in the back of my throat but refused to come out.
I'm your teacher, and though I'm small and inadequate, I have lived longer than you and I'm tough. I don't mind if you lean on me.
I took hold of one of the hands threaded around my neck. It was so small and yet felt so big. Just looking at her hands brought me comfort. I wondered if that sense of relief would grow stronger if I got closer.
I'm sure that, even when things are tough, you can lessen the burden by splitting it with someone else.
Roxy said as she pulled away. I drew her hand back out of instinct.
Whoa! Whoa!
Her tiny body easily fell into my lap. Faces close. Our eyes met Roxy's, looking sleepy, moist with tears. Her face was red, her lips drawn tightly shut. I put a hand on her back, guiding her close. Her heart was thundering furiously, and she felt warm.
We can do it.
Do what?
I mean, I heard that a man's heart feels lighter after he takes a woman to bed. Women feel the same. When things are tough, they want something to make them forget. I'm also devastated by Mr. Paul's death, so if that's what you want to do, I don't mind if you take me to bed with you. That's right, I want you to help me forget. But my body is kind of plain. If you're not interested, you could go to a brothel instead.
I had immense respect for her just as she was. What would it be like if I did as she suggested and took her to bed?
Anyway, I may not look it, but I am quite experienced. I'm sure I can perform much better than whatever girl you'd find on the streets. Just think of this as a casual thing, a way to wash away all the bad, as a way to test things out, just once.
Her incoherent explanations were lost on me, but I still found myself invested. If I found listening to the beat of her heart to be this soothing, then how much more relief might I find if our bodies were pressed together? My mind lingered on that excuse as she babbled.
Well, if you're really particular and being with someone who is skilled, maybe you could bow your head to Miss Elenias. And
I pushed her down onto the bed roughly, violently. Maybe I just had frustration to spare. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the first thing to greet me was Roxy's sleeping face. She looked so innocent with her hair let down. At the same time, the thought I screwed up ran through my mind. How was I going to explain this to Sylphie? Yet another thing for me to be concerned about now. But, for some reason, my vision felt clearer, as if everything I'd anguished over had been a dream. There was still a weight, a heaviness that clung to me, but it didn't feel like rock bottom anymore. It wasn't comparable to what I'd felt yesterday. Why had it been so effective? Was it because I performed an act that was associated with bringing new life into the world? Had that eased my sadness over the loss of Paul? Maybe not. By having sex, I'd more or less pushed the problem aside for now. Suddenly, Roxy's eyes fluttered open. She stared unblinkingly back at me for a few moments before rustling the covers, drawing them up over her body.
Good morning, Rudy. How was it?
I couldn't lie. I'd been horribly rough with her. I'd known almost immediately that her claim about being experienced had been nothing but a bald-faced lie. But I hadn't let that bother me. For her part, Roxy had welcomed everything openly, even the pain. I was both grateful and remorseful. Complimenting her felt wrong given that I was in love with Sylphie. Honestly speaking, her body was a bit small and didn't quite fit mine. Of course, I'd be lying if I said it hadn't felt good. It was true even now that I felt relaxed. There was no reason to lie if it would hurt her. It was amazing. Roxy's face heated gradually.
Thank you. But no, that's not what I meant. By how was it? I meant how was your heart feeling? Any lighter?
Oh, that was what she meant? Whoops. It does.
Then as repayment, I'd be happy if you'd put your arms around me.
Sure. As she requested, I wrapped my arms around her. Her skin felt soft damp because of the sweat. It was through her supple skin that I could feel her drumming pulse, a reassuring sound.
Your arms, sure, are strong. Not much like a magician.
I've been training. Her fingers traced lightly over my chest and upper arm. The motion was so endearing it threatened to sway my love for Sylphie. Slowly, I peeled myself away from her body and got up. Teacher, could I ask you something? Something strange.
What is it?
She must have read the room. Roxy's expression turned serious as she sat up in bed and tucked her legs beneath her, and as she sat there neatly, she was completely naked. It was so sexy and stimulating that I had to avert my eyes and shift the blanket to hide my lower half as I continued the conversation. This story is just fiction, something I made up. Then I told her the tale of a man, a make-believe one, of course. When he was young, terrible things happened to him and he secluded himself. He lived purely on his parents' financial support for decades. Then, one day, his parents suddenly died. The man didn't even attend their funeral, no. He did the worst thing a person could possibly do. The other members of his family saw that, beat him senseless, and drove him from his home. Although the man had nothing, he was lucky to find himself reborn in a new world. He turned over a new leaf and began trying to mend his ways. Life was going smoothly and he thought he could be happy if things stayed that way. But then he made a terrible mistake and let someone precious to him die. It was then that the man recalled the death of his parents. Though it was late, he finally mourned their loss. That was the story. The more I recounted it, the more the pent-up bile festering in my heart seemed to come spilling out. Maybe all I'd wanted was for someone to hear my story. Maybe it really was as simple as that. Roxy listened quietly. She inserted a word here and there, but for the most part, she was silent. What do you think that man should do? She remained quiet for a while. The story had come at her from out of nowhere. Maybe she was struggling to find a way to respond. I was sure she didn't think the person in the story was me. She was clever. She might have guessed there was some other meaning behind it.
If it were me, I would go visit my parents' graves. Even now, it's not too late. I'd also talk to the other family members.
But the graves and those family members are so far away that the man can't just easily go and see them. If he does go to see them, he may never be able to return. The man has a life of his own now. He's got his own family in this new world, and he wants to cherish them.
So, he can't go back?
No. There's a good chance that he couldn't go back, even if he wanted to. Roxy fell silent again. This time was briefer than the last.
In that case, there's nothing to be done. All he can do is cherish the family he has in front of him.
Her words were incredibly cliché. Anyone would have said the same. Anyone would have thought the same. The words weren't special in the least.
Even Paul would have wished for you to do the same, Rudy. Please look to the future. Everyone is waiting for you.
And yet, hearing those words made my heart felt as though a weight had been lifted. It wasn't just her words that were commonplace. The death of my parents from my previous world, even Paul's death, they were inevitable events. All I could do was face and accept them. I was here, after all, alive in this world, a world that I would continue to live in. I felt anxious, knowing I would have to relay Paul's death and Zenith's disability to the family waiting for us in the Northern Territories. I felt anxious about what I should do from here on out. I was overwhelmed with anxiety about a future full of unknowns. But I couldn't run away. The only thing I could do was solve the problems right in front of me. I had no idea what I should do, but all I could do was solve each issue one after the other. This was what I'd decided to do ever since I found myself in this world, right? That I was going to live to the fullest. So, I couldn't turn my eyes away. No matter what ordeals lay ahead, I would overcome them. I had to overcome them, even though overcoming them wouldn't make the pain entirely disappear. It would just bring a degree of relief. It felt like I'd broken free of the chains that had weighed me down. Teacher.
Yes?
Thank you. Roxy had saved me once again. No amount of gratitude could ever repay her for that. Chapter 12, Let's Go Home. I decided to consult with someone about Zenith. Now that I was thinking calmly about the situation, it wasn't a problem I could solve alone. I needed to get someone else's input, and besides, I had one other family member here with me. Teacher, I'm thinking about talking to Miss Lilia about what to do from now on.
I think that would be a good idea.
Once we'd clothed and groomed ourselves, we popped out the door. Ellen Eiley slunk out of her room at the exact same time, and our eyes met. Hers went wide with surprise after her gaze flitted between Roxy and me.
Roxy, you... Rudy, I'm sorry, but I also have something I need to speak with Miss Ellen Eiley about. Please go on and see Miss Lilia by yourself.
What was it that she had to talk to Ellen Eiley about? I had a vague idea, but if it was what I was thinking, it was probably best I not be present. Understood. I left her behind and stalked back to one of the rooms further in, the one where Zenith was sleeping. Just before I entered, I cast a brief glance behind me, long enough to see Ellen Eiley and Roxy dipping back into their shared room. I went ahead and slipped in through the door. Zenith was sitting on the bed with Lilia perched beside her in a chair. The sight reminded me of a hospital room, and my lips pressed into a tight line. Miss Lilia?
Yes, what is it, Lord Rudeus?
Lilia was tending to Zenith, face heavy with exhaustion. Before I did anything else, I needed to consult her. I'm sorry for forcing my mother's care on you.
Not at all. This is my job.
Oh, okay. A job, could she really call it that? It wasn't like anyone was paying her for it. How is she doing? I glanced over at my mother, who just stared right back. She didn't try to talk to me or examine me. All she did was stare blankly.
Well, while it doesn't seem like she has any memories, her body is strangely healthy. She has some stamina, too. There doesn't seem to be any other residual impairment. She can complete certain tasks by herself once I instruct her to, such as eating and changing.
Really? That meant she wasn't a complete invalid then. She just lost her memory.
Shira's opinion is that it's likely a side effect of the mana from being trapped in that crystal.
Will she recover? She hesitated.
According to what Miss Ellen Eiley told me, there's no hope of that.
Ellen Eiley said that? Was she knowledgeable about this kind of thing? I felt like it was a bit too soon to give up either way. There weren't even any decent doctors here worth taking her to.
The mistress treated me well. Now that the master has passed away, I will look after her.
I also want to do what I can. As soon as I said that, Lilia said curtly,
That's not necessary.
Her words were cold, isolating. Huh? I gasped in surprise, though I felt I had no right to argue. Right after my father died, when my mother needed care the most, I'd done nothing for her. It was my own fault if Lilia was fed up with me.
I realize I'm being impertinent, but will you allow me to speak frankly for a moment? You should be focusing on yourself.
On myself?
I'm sure that's what the master would say. I'm the one who should be looking after the mistress. That's why I'm here.
Lilia was exhausted. She had to be, and yet she was so strong. She'd already made her peace with Paul's death and was moving forward. I needed to learn from her example. Miss Lilia, you might be upset if I ask this.
I won't be.
But what is it that I should do? I knew it was something I should figure out for myself, but still, I asked. Lilia looked at me with surprise. I pretty much knew the answer myself, but I wanted to hear someone else say it.
First, you should return to Mistress Norn and the others and inform them of the master's death.
True, I had to go home. The next day, I gathered everyone and informed them that we were leaving the city. It was almost like I was taking up the leader's mantle. Everyone followed. Perhaps they saw me as Paul's replacement. If that was true, I needed to be worthy of the role. Just to be on the safe side, I went ahead and explained to them the route we would be taking. I avoided mention of teleportation circles, merely telling them that we were using a unique method to return. I also gave a strict warning against mentioning this method to anyone else.
But Geese is the type to down a few drinks and spill the beans.
Huh. Well, I'll be sure not to mention Boss's name even if that happens, so don't worry.
You couldn't seal people's mouths shut. I wouldn't give them the precise location. In fact, I'd prefer to blindfold them before we even entered the ruins if possible. Wait, yeah, that was a good idea. I do blindfolds. Maybe covering their eyes so they didn't see the magic circles themselves would be an effective way of keeping the information from spreading.
This trip is all well and good, but boss, you really okay now?
Apparently, Geese was concerned. His monkey face was furrowed as he peered over at me. Do I look all right? His lips twitched.
You don't really know, but, well, you do look better than you did before.
Well, then I'm okay now. To be honest, I wasn't okay yet at all. Thanks to Roxy, I had managed to pick myself up off the ground at least, but I had my doubts about whether we could really make the trek back home. I turned to Lilia. How is my mother? We'll be traveling through a desert for half a month. Do you think she can handle it?
I'm not sure, but I'll take responsibility for caring for her along the way.
I appreciate it. Lilia looked earnest as she declared her intentions. I was sure I would be able to help her with her task, too. If there was an issue with Zenith's stamina, we could just slow our pace.
If you're worried, let's buy a wagon.
You do realize we'll have to dump it at some point?
Oh, who cares? We're drowning in cash right now.
While I was steeped in sorrow, Geese and the others had hired some people to enter the labyrinth with them and collect the magic items located in the treasure chamber beyond the Hydra's room. The teleportation labyrinth was an old place, and countless adventurers had lost their lives there, so magic items abounded. They also stripped the creature of its scales, or rather, the magic stones that had been plastered across its skin. These were stones that could absorb mana. Selling all of that had netted us a colossal fortune.
We're carrying what we can back to Asura to sell.
He said, showing me a bag bursting at the seams with magic stones and accessories like pendants and rings. Paul had died and I was grieving, but Geese was preoccupied with how to make more cash. The thought alone irritated me a bit, but for the sake of our futures, if nothing else, it would be foolish not to retrieve what we could. Money was essential, and at least this way, everyone was repaid for their assistance. Geese's judgment was correct. Besides, considering I'd sunk into depression and done nothing, it wasn't like I had the high ground to say anything. I was sure Geese would have obeyed, albeit reluctantly, if I'd given the order for us to go home the very next day.
I gave your portion to Lilia.
The others had met and decided how to divvy up the cash without me. They allotted me a massive portion, partly because I'd received Paul's share too, but also because Talhind had split half of his with me, saying, "Nay, I wasn't all that helpful this time, so here." Vieira and Shiera, also acknowledging how hard it would be for us now that Paul was gone, had each split theirs with Lilia. Lilia intended to give every bit of that money to me. In my opinion, everyone had done the best they could, so I felt like they should take their share. But, well, I wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. It was true that things would undoubtedly get harder from here on out.
We also did a thorough sweep of the final area, but never did find any hint as to why Zenith ended up there.
Nothing. Well, thank you for looking.
Nah, it was nothing.
We had no idea what had caused Zenith to be trapped in that crystal. Even if we did discover the reason, there was no guarantee it would lead to her recovery. Either way, treatment would have to wait until we returned home. Geese, could I entrust the preparations for our departure to you and Miss Ellen Niles?
Yep.
Very well.
I was sure I could trust them to carry it out. We planned our trip down to the minute details. I knew the route, and everyone here was an experienced traveler, but I didn't want us to lose anyone else, so I proceeded cautiously. We plotted out a route that would allow us to avoid the bandits we'd encountered on the way here. The path was a bit of a detour, but that wouldn't be a problem. I was concerned about Zenith, but that problem was quickly solved. Geese purchased a one-person carriage pulled by a beast that resembled an armadillo. It looked like it had been designed especially for desert travel. Geese had done well. The armadillo was apparently a domesticated beast that dwelled in the eastern reaches of the Greyrat continent. It seemed both costly and wasteful to purchase one and then just dispose of it later. But as the saying goes, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. Still, if we were going this far, we might as well bring the beast through the teleportation circle and take it home with us. As long as we could get it past the stairs, it would be fine. Though if it died due to climate differences when we arrived on the other side, it would die for sure if we left it in the desert. We might as well take it back and sell it to someone with an affinity for such animals. Thus, our preparations were complete and we set off. The trip proceeded smoothly. We slid easily past the bandits. We happened upon some monsters along the way, but with our numbers, they posed no danger. We had 2 warriors, 2 magicians, 1 warrior mage, and 1 healer. There was a distinct difference in power between each person, but we were well balanced. Although we were missing 1 swordsman who should have been making this journey with us, traveling without a left hand proved to be more inconvenient than I'd imagined. It didn't hurt, but I would often try using it without thinking, only for my arm to swipe empty air. A lot of things proved difficult without 2 hands. Fortunately, Roxy was there to assist each time. Ever since that night, she'd been glued to me, supporting me. She made a habit of walking to my left. Then whenever anything happened, she was right there to assist, almost like a lover. I was dense. I told myself I wouldn't be, but I was. But even I couldn't help but realize it at this point. Roxy had feelings for me. Teacher? I called out to her one night when we were both on guard duty. There was a crackling fire before us, and she sat beside me. Everyone else was inside the shelter, sleeping. The shelter was sturdy enough, but we still maintained a 2-person watch in shifts, just to be safe.
Yes, what is it, Rudy?
Roxy was sitting close, right beside me, in fact, with her body pressed against mine. I could feel the softness and the warmth of her small shoulders through the fabric of her robe, almost like we were lovers. I mean, we had done something that lovers do. The night I'd spent with her, leaning on her, indulging in her kindness, it might have lent itself to the misunderstanding that we were lovers, or at least, that might be what she wanted. I wondered if she knew I was married. Perhaps she didn't. I didn't feel like she'd be this bold about her affections if she knew. No, the problem wasn't Roxy. It was with me. What I was doing right now was cheating. I swore fidelity to Sylphie, and yet here I was breaking that vow. Maybe it would be best for me to make things clear to her, like thank you, but I'm fine now. Let's end things here because it would only be disrespectful to my wife otherwise. Ever since I met Roxy after first coming to this world, I'd relied upon her greatly. She'd taught me magic and language. In a way, I'd only been able to befriend Zenoba because of her. Sylphie was the one who'd cured my erectile dysfunction, but in the 3 years since, Roxy had been a source of mental support for me. I owed her so much. Plus, she'd gone so far as to use her body to comfort me this time. Even though it was her first time, she'd offered herself up to help me, to pull me out of the darkness I'd sunk into. When I was at my weakest, on my knees, she'd extended her hand to me. Even now, she was keeping her true feelings to herself to lend me aid. So how would it feel to cast her aside once everything was over? Wasn't that horribly disrespectful? No, enough. No more self-appeasement. Talking about manners or how she'd saved me, they were all excuses. I loved Roxy. That's right, I loved her. If you asked me which I loved more between her and Sylphie, I couldn't give you an answer. My love for each of them was different but equal. That's why I was wavering right here in this moment. A moment where I loved Sylphie but loved Roxy too. But it was Sylphie to whom I'd sworn my fidelity. While I had broken that oath, a promise was still a promise, even if it was one that had been broken once before. Yes, okay, Sylphie had said, I don't mind if you bring a second woman home. But I was the one who'd dismissed those words, swearing I would only be with her. Sylphie had been so happy when I said that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I couldn't betray her. You see, the truth is, I'm actually married and will be having a child soon, so I feel bad saying this, but could you stop doing things for me like you're my lover? Her shoulder gave a jolt.
I already knew you were married. I heard from Miss Eleanor's.
Oh, you did? So she knew, and she was still acting like this. Then that must mean… Wait, what exactly did that mean?
It's fine, I understand. There's nothing for you to be concerned about. I was the one who took advantage of you when you were feeling weak. Besides, I know under ordinary circumstances, you'd never get involved with someone as tiny and unappealing as me.
Tiny and unappealing? That's nonsense.
You don't have to comfort me. I'm perfectly aware of how I look.
True, her body might be petite, she had no curves, and she was thin as a stick. In the feminine department, she would likely even lose to Sylphie. But you might also say she simply had the body of a lolly, and I was the type who could appreciate that.
Don't worry. I don't plan to barge into your life. I'm just going to be your left hand for the length of this trip. Just ignore me once it's all over and look after your wife instead.
All right. But still, she really had saved me. Doing nothing in return couldn't be right. Would you allow me to repay you at the very least?
Repay me, you say?
Yes, if there's something I can do, just name it. Anything. Her eyes wavered. Oh, crap. Maybe I'd said the wrong thing. Anything wasn't fine. Anything was exactly what she'd done to help me out.
Well, then, would you hear my excuse? All you have to do is listen.
Sure, all right, go ahead. Roxy was quiet for a short period after that, but finally the words came trickling out, one after the other.
Fell in love at first sight.
With who?
Huh?
Don't tell me you fell in love with my father?
No, not at all. With you, Rudy, when you saved me back in that labyrinth.
When we reunited, back then, she'd treated me like such a complete stranger that I couldn't even keep a lid on my nausea. I'd hugged her out of nowhere, then barfed. I didn't see anything worth falling for there. I figured her feelings had developed after that.
You can hardly blame me. I was on death's door, about to abandon all hope, and this handsome, dashing young man appeared and saved me. Anyone would have been shaken by that.
I'm handsome?
The very picture of my ideal partner.
Really? Her ideal partner? I had to keep myself from grinning.
The entire time we were exploring in that labyrinth, I was staring at your face.
Come to think of it, our eyes did meet a lot, but you always turned away immediately.
That's because, well, come on, it's embarrassing looking. Someone as handsome as you right in the eye.
I figured it was impossible. Miss Ellenise and the others were talking at the pub.
What's Rudy going to do after what happened with Paul? That kind of thing. Miss Ellenise and Mr. Geese said you'd be fine, that you could stand back up on your own.
But I recalled our time together in Buena Village. I remembered watching you and Mr. Paul enjoy your sword training together. The two of you got along so well back then. And then I suddenly remembered something else. The first time you rode a horse. Back then you were so terrified. Your body was so tense, and you couldn't move at all. I thought to myself, this kid is so mature and has so much talent, but he's actually really weak. Then I remembered all your interactions with Paul, from when you trained together in the past to your banter in the labyrinth. And I saw you how depressed you were, how listless, and I remembered that you're much weaker than you appear. It felt like Paul meant far more to you than anyone had realized. Now that you'd lost him, I was afraid you might sink so far into depression that you couldn't get back up on your own. Of course, I didn't think I'd be the one to help you get back up. I heard you had someone you loved. I was sure that person would have the power to put you back together again if you felt broken. But you needed them more than ever before right then, and they weren't here. I felt like someone had to save you. But Miss Ellenise and Mr. Geese just planned to leave you be, and Miss Lilia was too busy attending to Miss Zenith. So I thought, I am the only one who can do this. I'm sure that must sound like an excuse, but I didn't intend for it to go that far at first. I did get the feeling that you respected me, but I'm tiny and unattractive. I have no idea who your partner is, but I'm sure she must be a beauty if she's related to Miss Ellenellas. I never thought there'd be a chance you'd look at me the same way, but I ignored that, thinking it would be fine as long as I did something that could help. But then when you suddenly grabbed me and I saw your face up close, I couldn't help thinking maybe I have a chance. Miss Ellenise and the others had just talked about how sex could cheer men up when they were down. So, I just thought, maybe even I can do this. I couldn't help it. I love you.
Roxy's tears started falling one after the other. The moment I saw them, pain shot through my chest like my heart was being gouged out.
It was cruel. My feelings for you were obvious, but no one told me about you being married until way after the fact. It wasn't fair.
I wondered at whom those words were directed. Not me, I thought. So, perhaps, Elenilis, it was true that I hadn't told her about my marriage, though. There was no special reason for that. It just hadn't come up. If she was going to blame anyone, I was equally accountable. Still, if our roles were reversed, if I'd reunited with Sylphie, she'd saved me, and I'd fallen in love with her, then proceeded to make romantic overtures only to discover she already had another partner. Well, I'd surely be shocked. No, there was no doubt about it. I definitely would be. Teacher? I wanted Roxy to be rewarded for what she'd done. She should be rewarded.
What is it?
But what was I supposed to do? What could I do to repay her? How could I bring her fulfillment without betraying Sylphie? At the very least, why don't we grant your wish while we're making this trip? I'll be your lover until I make it back home, and then... And then what? That wouldn't solve anything. I knew that much. This wouldn't help either of us. I would just be betraying Sylphie. It would only be temporary, and it was the worst possible proposal I could have come up with.
That's an incredibly appealing idea. But please stop with all that. You don't have to do anything.
Roxy squeezed my arm tight. Then lightly she tapped her hand against my cheek. All right. I didn't have to do anything. If Roxy was fine with that, then I would do as she asked. I'd done everything she told me to do until now, and I would continue to do so. That's what you want, right, teacher? We arrived at Bazaar in a little over a month. Once there, we bought some souvenirs, such as glasswork, for Sylphie and the others. One such piece was a glass bottle with an interesting shape and a red glass hair accessory with the tribal crest on it. I prayed they wouldn't break on the journey home. After that, we bought some rice. Seed rice, that is. I wasn't confident it would grow well back home, but I wanted to try. If that failed, I could always eat it as is. That evening, Ellen Elias took the women of the group to go drinking. One of those girls-only parties, I guess. Not that any of them were young enough to be considered girls anymore. Lilia was the only one who refused, on account of having to look after Zenith. The rest, Roxy included, tagged along with Elenilis. Geese and Talhan didn't participate, of course, but they did come up with their own excuses to go out. I stayed to help Lilia and look after Zenith. My mother could walk, eat, and go to the bathroom, but she wouldn't talk or proactively do anything herself. She was almost like a machine carrying out the commands she was given. Occasionally, she would stare in my direction. Wouldn't say a word, just stare. Maybe she felt some connection to me because we were related by blood. The chances of something triggering her memory to return were, well, slim to none. I wondered what Paul would do if he were here. Truly, I wondered. Surely he would do a good job. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would fail. In the middle of the night, Roxy came to see me, absolutely hammered. Apparently, she told Ellen Elias everything, letting all her pent-up resentment spill forth. For her part, Ellen Elias had to feel conflicted. She'd said that Roxy was her dearest friend. She had to want to support Roxy's love life, but not at the expense of her granddaughter's marriage. I imagine that put her in a difficult spot. Roxy beat her tiny fists against my chest, then returned to her sleeping quarters. The next day, we arrived at the Griffin's Ledge. Normally, a carriage couldn't make the climb, but I used my magic to force it up onto the ledge. On the first day, the armadillo cowered at the scent of the griffins and stopped in its tracks. I wondered if we would have to double back and leave it in Bazaar, but once we defeated the offending monster and it saw Geese Wolf down the enemy's meat right in front of it, the armadillo seemed to sense it was safe and proceeded to merrily plod along. According to Geese, this was a trick he learned from one of his demon friends. By defeating and eating a monster's natural predator right in front of it, you instilled the idea in its head that your own group was superior in strength to that of the predator. When I asked if the man who taught him this had a lizard-like face, Geese just laughed and said, "So you know him. Should have figured you would, boss." It took a whole day of travel across the ledge before we arrived at the desert. From there, it was a further 3 days to pierce through the sandstorm. When I used my magic to interrupt it, Roxy said, her voice tinged with jealousy. So your earth magic is Saint level 2. Amazing. There was an abundance of monsters after that, so we proceeded with extreme caution, even though we had plenty of people along this time, including several veterans. Even if 1 or 2 of us were in a pinch, someone else could immediately dive in to help. We even crushed the Samdaruda, which we avoided engaging with on the way in. After that came a giant lizard resembling a T-Rex, which we similarly defeated. I feared the sandworms along the way might pose a real threat, but Geese was able to sniff them all out. Apparently there was a trick to it. According to him, there was a thin, donut-shaped ridge in the ground where they were located. As long as you carefully scanned the terrain for that ridge, you could identify their hiding spots at once. That said, the desert wasn't exactly flat. There were plenty of occasions where I failed to correctly identify the ridges, probably partly due to my lack of experience. Succubi attacked us too, but we dispensed with them easily. Since our party was comprised mostly of women, Geese and I were both done in by their pheromones, but at least we had detoxification magic to counter it. My true feelings did slip forth at one point, making me try to go after Roxy, but it was otherwise uneventful. What shocked me the most was that Talhand was entirely unaffected by them. He snorted and said, "Course it doesn't work on me. I guess a sound body leads to a sound mind after all. Incredible think it's take as take." We arrived at the ruins, just as we'd planned. Everyone besides Elnalise was blindfolded outside. Shiera fussed a bit about it, but Vieira persuaded her and we were able to proceed without issue. The blindfolds themselves were for little more than peace of mind, but as long as they didn't see the circles, they wouldn't know what had happened. As for the wagon, we left it behind. It couldn't make it past the entrance. Surely Zenith could make the next week on foot. Now that we'd made it this far, I didn't even mind if the last leg of our journey took us a little longer. The armadillo was able to make it through the entrance, so we brought it along with us. I had no idea if the climate back home would agree with it, but it had to be better than leaving it here for other monsters to feast on. Geese and the others were surprised once they removed their blindfolds and discovered the scenery around them had changed completely. We went from being surrounded by a desert to being smack dab in the middle of a forest. Their shock was understandable. I warned them strictly to never talk about how we'd arrived here, even if they managed to guess how we'd done it. That was how we left the Begaric continent. Just a bit further and I would be home. Chapter 13. Return. Snow was falling lightly in the northern territories. It had been approximately 4 months since I first set out. Autumn and the beastman's mating season had long since passed, leading into a long winter season. There was snow up to my ankles, even in the middle of the forest. If we'd gotten here even a month later, the snow would have been all the way up to my chest, making it difficult to travel the rest of the way to Sharia. Miss Elenilis and I will lead the way. If any monsters popped up, we would defeat them all. Mana wasn't a problem. Zenith was walking without any complaints of exhaustion. The armadillo was shivering, but it would be fine as long as I warmed it with my magic occasionally. Everything's fine, I thought to myself as we went. One evening, Elenice and I were on lookout together.
Rudeus, there's something I want to talk to you about.
I could already vaguely sense what the contents of that conversation would be. Roxy, no doubt. I sat directly in front of her, legs folded beneath me, the perfect posture to prostrate myself before her if she started condemning me. Elenice took a more comfortable seat on the ground. I wondered how she'd express her anger. Would she lash out at me for disrespecting Sylphie, or would she scold me for sleeping with Roxy? But she did neither.
Rudeus, you're not a follower of Melis, are you?
Huh? I didn't understand what she meant, but I did know that there was only one person I could call God. That hadn't changed since I was little. I'm not.
I didn't think so. Selphie isn't either, is she?
No, she shouldn't be. Sylphie wasn't religious. In fact, the only devoted Millis follower I knew was Cliff. He had an amulet of the church dangling from his neck, and once a week he attended something akin to Mass at the church. Sylphie wore no such symbols of Millis, and she didn't go to the church. Maybe Cliff was a poor comparison. It was possible she did have faith, but I'd never heard her say as much, if so.
My Cliff is a stout believer.
He sure is?
Did you know the Millis faith rules that a man can only have one single wife? It's an old-fashioned kind of edict, saying a man must love his wife for the rest of his life. Still, it feels pretty good to be on the receiving end of such affection.
That sounded about right. I had no doubt it felt good to love someone with the whole of your being and be loved just the same in return. My wavering, cheating heart, on the other hand, had wandered to Roxy. I did love her. There was no doubt about that. But I also remembered how miserable I'd been when I had ED. Sylphie had been the one who cured me and brought happiness back into my life, and so I wanted to repay her with love that would fulfill her in return. Those feelings were just as strong.
However, Rudeus, I'm different. I don't think loving multiple partners at the same time is wrong.
I'm not surprised to hear you feel that way, but isn't that insincere? Elenilis merely shook her head.
If you threw Sylphie aside, that would be one thing. But as long as you love her like you should, it's not insincere.
If you have two people to love, that means the time you can afford to give each of them will be halved, right?
It's not like you're with each other all day long, right? It won't be halved. It might be a little less than it was before, but that's it.
So, taking a second partner wouldn't be a problem even if the affection I gave my first partner was reduced because of it. Humans could be oblivious to emotional upticks, but rather sensitive to even minute reductions. It would be terrible if Sylphie began to think my love for her was dwindling.
Try to think back. After Paul married Lelia, was Zenith unhappy?
Happy or unhappy, I felt like that wasn't really the issue here. Though now that she mentioned it, it was true that Zenith hadn't been particularly unhappy. Things had been the same as before. In fact, she'd grown even closer to Lilia than before, and had looked all the happier for it. Paul might have been unhappy given that he was suddenly on the receiving end of both of his wives' attacks, but perhaps that was a kind of happiness in of itself, one that would never return. What is it exactly that you want to say? Remembering Paul had brought the grief bubbling back up. It might only worsen if we continued to talk about him. I just wanted to hear what Elenilis's point was.
Take Roxy as your wife. You love her, don't you?
I froze. Are you being serious right now?
Yes, of course I am.
Miss Elenilis, is that really okay for you to say? You are Sylphie's grandmother. Shouldn't you be looking out for her happiness? Not that I had any right to blame her. I was the one who'd had an affair, the one who'd broken my oath to Sylphie and slept with Roxy. That fact remained unchanged regardless of the circumstances. And yet, I found myself taking an accusatory tone.
Yes, I can say it. No one else could say this but me. I realize I shouldn't say it like this, but before I was Sylphie's grandmother, I was Roxy's close friend.
For a moment, I didn't understand what she meant. Then I realized she was talking about the order in which they'd met. Elenice had met Roxy first, then encountered Sylphie later on.
Honestly, I can't stand to look at Roxy the way she is right now. She yearns to throw herself into the relationship and lean on you, but is forcing herself to hang back just because she happened to meet you too late.
I felt bad for Roxy when she put it like that, but I also felt bad for Sylphie when I looked at it from her perspective.
If you part on bad terms, I have no doubt she'll lead a miserable life. It's possible some dirtbag will take advantage of her, treat her terribly, and then sell her off as collateral for his unpaid loans, causing her to end up bearing the child of a man she doesn't even know.
Isn't that going a bit too far?
I know of a woman who led such a life.
She spoke so frankly, I found myself wondering for a moment if she was speaking of her own personal experience.
I want Roxy to be happy, even if that happiness comes with conditions.
I mean, I want the same thing.
Rudeus, I know you can do it. You can love Sylphie and Roxy just the same. You're Paul's son, after all. You should be able to do that.
Could I really? Perhaps. No, definitely. I did love them both equally. I did and I could. But was that really okay? Was it okay to say as much? To be that self-serving no? These were just the whisperings of the devil. I couldn't listen to them. No, Sylphie is my only...
I didn't plan on saying this, but when we drank together in Bazaar, Roxy told me that her monthly visitor still hadn't come.
Huh? Monthly visitor... Oh, wait. I knew what that was. But did that mean...
Well, It's not for certain yet.
We'd done the deed, it was possible. Plus, the night they'd gotten drunk, she had come and beaten on my chest, albeit weakly. Maybe that had been a sign? Ellen's eyes peered into my face and said,
Rudeus, if Roxy really is pregnant with your child, what will you do?
Her question conjured an image in my head of Paul back in the day, back when Lilia was pregnant with his child. He'd looked so pitiful. I was the one who had saved him back then when he'd been helpless. Now I thought he was a man deserving of respect, but that didn't mean I wanted to make the same mistakes he had. I'll do what must be done.
Which is?
I'll marry her. Mushoku Tensei Vol12 by Raifujin Namaganade. Cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit artale.ai and use promotion code ARTALE to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story. Mary, the moment the word left my mouth, it felt like my heart had dropped into my stomach. I loved Sylphie, but I also wanted to marry Roxy and have her be a part of my family. I didn't want anyone else to take her. I wanted to make her mine. It was selfish of me. I'd said the same thing to Sylphie, gotten her pregnant with my child, and now I desired another woman as well. It was unforgivable. Only a piece of garbage could think the way I was thinking. I'd said the same of Paul so many times up until now, called him a piece of garbage just the same. But I was a man too. Now that I had two women that I loved and wanted, couldn't I do my best to have them both, just as Paul had done? Perhaps Sylphie would be disgusted with me and Roxy would abandon me. But wasn't it worth trying, even if I lost them both? Oh, that's right. This wasn't just up to me. Whether Roxy and Sylphie agree to it is a different story.
Indeed. Well, I'll go get Roxy.
Huh? Leaving me with those words, Ellen's immediately strode into one of the nearby tents. After a few moments, Roxy came out by herself. She didn't seem the least bit sleepy. Instead, she glanced over at me with a nervous look on her face. Perhaps Ellen's had said something to her.
What is it that you wanted to talk to me about, Rudy?
She sat in front of me, legs folded up under her. I followed her lead and sat up straighter. What was I supposed to say? Everything was happening so fast. I hadn't come up with the words yet. No, thinking wasn't necessary. My feelings for Roxy weren't something I needed to think over before speaking. I've been wanting to say this for a very, very long time.
Yes?
I love you, teacher. I always have, since long, long ago. And I don't just love you, I respect you. You seem to be self-conscious of the fact that you can't use magic as well as me, but that doesn't matter to me. Your teachings have helped me numerous times. They're the only reason I was able to make it this far. Roxy's face gradually heated up. Mine was probably tinged pink as well. Talking face to face like this was embarrassing.
Well, thank you for that.
But, you see, I also have a wife.
Yes, I've heard.
Was it really appropriate to say, so please be my second wife? Wasn't that a selfish way to put it? But I couldn't think of a better way to spin it. What should I do? I just had to say it. No matter how I spun it, my request remained the same. I was suggesting not splitting up with Sylphie, but instead trying to bring Roxy into the family without seeking Sylphie's input first. I would have to get her approval after the fact. That was exactly the kind of thing a garbage human being would do. Still, I had to say it now. Roxy might wander off if I didn't. She was the kind to immediately set off once the job at hand was done. If I didn't stop her now, it might be too late. Enough. If I was going to regret not saying it later, then I should blurt it out now, even if that made me a piece of shit. My wife's name is Paul Greyrat now, but she didn't originally have a surname. She was just Sylphiette.
Yes, so I've heard.
Would you mind making your name Roxy Greyrat as well? She looked suspicious for a moment, but she must have realized what I meant in the next instant because she clamped a hand over her mouth. Roxy regained her composure almost as quickly.
I appreciate you saying that, truly. But are you sure you shouldn't get your wife's approval first?
Of course. We were talking about a complete stranger becoming part of our family. I absolutely had to consult Sylphie. I'd also need to explain it to my younger sisters. Leah, too. I do need her approval.
In that case,
She was going to turn me down. It seemed Roxy wanted me to choose her, and only her after all. No sooner had that thought popped into the back of my head than
please ask me again after you've received her approval.
Roxy said with a serious look on her face, the snow sprinkling down around us. Please ask me again. The words echoed in my mind. I felt my body heat up as I registered the fact that she hadn't rejected me. We drew close to the magic city of Sharia. I talked to Lily about Roxy as well. Her usual poker face in place. She merely said, "I see then. Very well." It didn't sound like she judged me for it, probably because she'd been in the same position as Roxy before. No, that wasn't it. It was because the notion of monogamous marriage only existed in Milis. Either way, it took a weight off my shoulders to have made my promise to Roxy and gained Lilia's understanding. All that remained was to get home, explain the circumstances of the trip to Sylphie, and bow my head before her as I pleaded for Roxy's inclusion into the family. I still felt the weight of the knowledge that I would need to explain Paul and Zenith's situation to Isa and Norn, but they would have to accept it as I had. I was certain Norn would react with anger and blame me, but I was still going to do it. I wasn't going to run. No matter how things turned out, I would have no regrets. Regrets? Just then, anxiety reared its ugly head. Those were the man god's words. He'd said I would regret something. True enough, there was Paul's death, Zenith becoming a husk, and me losing my left hand. I'd lost a lot. Yet strangely enough, I didn't feel regret. I could thank Roxy for that. Yes, part of me thought, if only I'd been stronger, if only I'd learned how to wield the sword better, if only I'd been strong enough to defeat that Hydra. But another part of me felt strongly that it would have been impossible either way. My aptitude for battle wasn't the best. I couldn't wrap that battle aura stuff around my body, nor did I know how to try. You had to be able to manipulate your battle aura to advance as a swordsman. Besides, the Hydra had been immune to magic. Even if I had worked diligently to learn king-tier spells, they would have been useless. There might have been some other way, but the past was the past. That was why I had no regrets. Paul's death had allowed me to reflect on my past. I'd worried people and caused them trouble, but ultimately, there was good that had come out of it all. What I felt wasn't regret, it was sadness. Just sadness. Sadness was all I carried with me from the Begadic continent. But that was also why I felt anxious now. Perhaps the thing I would really regret was yet to come. For instance, maybe something had happened to the little sisters I left behind. Remember what he said. He'd mentioned this and that about Linnea and Prasenna. Did that mean something had happened to one of them then? Was I supposed to have enlisted their help to solve some kind of problem here? Or don't tell me, had something happened to my pregnant wife? Those were the only things that might leave me with regrets. Despite my apprehension, we couldn't move any faster. The weather had worsened, and the snow was rapidly picking up. The others seemed unfazed, but Zenith was struggling. I used my earth magic to craft a seat I could hoist onto my back and carried her. The armadillo looked half frozen. Perhaps we should have left it behind after all, but it was already too late for that. I should at least give it a name so it doesn't die without one, I decided. Dillo. Dillo was a good name. Do your best, Dillo. It had taken just 5 days to reach the ruins when we were on our way to Begadic, but it was taking over 10 on the return journey. It wasn't that long compared to all my adventures so far, and yet somehow it felt like the longest leg of the entire trip. We arrived at the magic city of Sharia. I immediately headed for my house, feeling my pace quicken.
Hey, boss, what is it? Looks like you've seen a ghost. Shouldn't you cast some of that detoxification stuff on yourself?
I ignored him and just continued my hurried advance.
So this is the center of the city, eh? Should we go ahead and get ourselves an inn for now? There's no way we can all stay at Boss's place with this many people. Hey, boss, you listening? Boss? Hey, Rudeus?
At some point, I broke into a sprint. I left everyone behind and dashed toward my house down the familiar streets I'd walked before, in a city I'd lived in for over a year now. Those I passed regarded me with confusion, wondering what my hurry was, but I went as fast as I could, stumbling, completely off balance. Perhaps the lack of a left hand was impeding my ability to run smoothly. Just as I was about to fall over, someone grabbed me and held me upright.
What is all of this hurry for?
It's just...
What is it? You've been panicking for a bit now. Did something happen?
Oh, no. I just have this feeling that Sylphie is in trouble.
In trouble? Based on what?
Nothing, really. I brushed her off and broke into a hurried walk again. I wanted to relieve this anxiety as quickly as possible. My house was just ahead. If things were as they should be, Sylphie's stomach should be heavy with a baby, and she should be home. Or maybe she'd already given birth. It would be a premature one if so. If that had happened, then maybe... anything but that. Anything else. I just didn't want any more bad things to happen. I arrived at the house. The snow had piled up, but the place didn't look that much different from when I'd left. The number of trees and potted plants in the garden had increased slightly. A product of Aisha's hobby, I assumed. The place looked more beautiful than it had before. I snatched my key out of my belongings, shoved it in the hole on the door, and struggled to turn it. The metal was cold and my hand was trembling. The door wouldn't open. The key wouldn't turn. Chesh! I reached for the door knocker. It felt like ice on my skin, but I banged it several times anyways.
Are you sure it isn't already open?
As she suggested, I tried the doorknob, turned and pulled, and it came open. Too careless, I thought as I started to step in. My eyes immediately met those of someone at the opposite end of the room trying to open a door.
Oh, big brother.
Aisha, is everyone safe?
What do you mean?
Puzzled, Aisha's gaze flitted between me and Elenilas, now standing beside me, then behind us. When I followed and looked back, I saw Roxy struggling to catch her breath. For the moment, I grabbed Aisha by the shoulders. She must have sensed something was off, because she glanced at her right shoulder and her eyes went wide. Visibly shocked, she looked between my face and my hand.
Huh? What is this? What happened to your...
I see you're safe. What about Sylphie?
Huh? Oh, she's right in here.
At her words, I realized that just behind Aisha, looking equally puzzled, was Sylphie. Her stomach had doubled or perhaps tripled in size. Even her breasts were a bit swollen. She was about 7 or 8 months along now, probably already producing breast milk. No, that didn't matter right now.
Rudy, what is it?
Sylphie, are you all right? Nothing's happened?
Huh? No, everyone has been really wonderful to me, and Aisha's been doing her best to help out as well.
So Sylphie was fine? Yes, I could see as much. What about everyone else? Norn, Arlinia, and Zenoba, and the rest safe?
Huh? Safe? Nothing's happened here.
No one's gotten sick or injured?
And no, nothing noteworthy.
Sylphie looked utterly dumbfounded, as if she had no idea what I was talking about. Seeing that expression, I realized there really was nothing wrong.
Big brother?
By the time I realized it, Aisha's face was towering over me. Boy, she sure had grown. No, wait. I just sunk to the floor. Okay. The tension left my body. In the end, the regret the man-god had spoken of was the regret around Paul's death, and the deaths of my parents from my previous life. The rest of my anxiety had been needless worry. Ha! Thank God. Sylphie gradually approached and rested her hand on my shoulder. I could feel her warmth spread through the fabric of my robe. She immediately knelt down and gently wrapped her arms around me. I slipped mine around her as well, albeit clumsily. With my left hand missing and squeezed, her familiar scent filled my nose.
Welcome home, Rudy.
There was so much I needed to tell her about Paul, about Zenith, about Roxy. I also needed to welcome those I'd left in the plaza into my home. I'd come all the way here by myself, after all. I'd panicked a bit too much. Nothing had happened. I should have just taken my time with the others, but there was something I needed to say first, before I did any of that. I'm home. I'd returned. Chapter 14. Report. Things went by in a frenzy after I returned. First, Aisha ran out to fetch Norn from school. Roxy, either out of consideration or because it felt too awkward lingering here, went off to retrieve Geese and the others. Ellen Isles seemed anxious to rush to her beloved Cliff's side, but resisted the temptation. As we waited for everyone to gather here, I passed the time asking Sylphie about what had happened since I left. I was sure she wanted nothing more than to hear how my adventure had gone, but she didn't complain as she recounted events during my absence. During my absence, her pregnancy was moving along smoothly. According to the doctor, the child would most likely be born right on time. As for the others, they were apparently doing well. There'd been a small incident at the school a few days ago, but Nanahoshi had resolved it. Something must have changed in her if she was going out of her way to help the people of this world. Neither Aisha nor Norn had gotten sick or injured. They were both doing well. Aisha's gardening hobby had taken off, and she even had new plants growing in her room. I'd have to take a look for myself when I had the opportunity. Norn was gradually becoming an idol-like figure at the school, having spawned something akin to a fan club. It made sense given how cute she was. Zenoba, Cliff, and Linnea and Persina popped in occasionally at the house to check in. Ariel had apparently complained that I'd said nothing to her before leaving. She was right, come to think of it. I'd need to apologize the next time I saw her. Even so, everything I heard suggested they were all doing well. When I had the time, I would have to go inform them all that I'd returned. Apparently, the only exception to our group of friends was Badigadi, who remained unaccounted for. Well, he was immortal, so I doubted anything bad had happened to him. Sylphie looked adorable as always, with a finger pressed to her chin as she tried to recall the past 6 months. So nothing happened to anyone.
Nope, nothing I think would worry you, at least.
All right?
Anyway, so tell me, what happened with you?
I'll tell you. Just wait until everyone is gathered first. A lot happened.
Okay. Oh, it looks like they're back.
In the midst of that conversation, Roxy returned, along with Geese, Taland, Lilia, Vieira, Shiera, Eleniles, and Zenith. With Sylphie and myself included, there were 10 of us. Our living area was spacious enough to accommodate them, and then some.
Oh, you must be the boss wife. You sure are cute. Boss, you're a lucky one.
That's my granddaughter.
Yep, and if not for her slutty granny, she'd be perfect.
Excuse me.
The rest of the party ignored their 2 bickering companions, moving to greet Sylphie one by one. She received them humbly, returning their greetings in kind.
A pleasure. I'm Roxy. Migurdia.
Roxy, as in the master that Rudy is always boasting about?
Yes, that one. Although I'm not special enough to warrant such boasts.
Oh. Well, I'm pleased to meet you. I've heard so much about you from Rudeus. I'm Sylphiette. It's an honor.
Yes. For me as well.
It made sense that she would be, I guess. Not much time had passed since our conversation the other day about her joining our family. But that talk would have to wait until later.
It has been a while, Mistress Sylphiette.
Yes, it has, Miss Lilia. There's no need for Mistress Sylphiette. Could you just call me Sylphie, as you did so long ago?
No, I cannot treat you as I did before, not now that you've wed Lord Rudeus.
Oh. All right.
Leah had taught her everything she knew about housework. In a way, she was Sylphie's master, the same way Roxy was mine. Of course, Sylphie respected her.
It's been a while, Miss Zenith. Miss Zenith.
Zenith just stared blankly ahead even as Sylphie called out to her. Troubled Sylphie glanced back at me. The look on her face said she was worried Zenith wasn't pleased by our marriage. Sylphie, I'll explain about my mother and father once Norn gets here.
Yes, I don't see Mr. Paul here.
she began to say, her eyes searching the room. It didn't take long for her to infer what had happened after everyone fell silent and she glimpsed their faces. Sylphie pursed her lips and went quiet. Silence fell as we waited for Norn to return. It was tacitly understood that we couldn't begin until she arrived. After a bit, Aisha and Norn returned, both breathless from the run.
Be big brother, welcome back from your long trip. Is your hand okay?
It's fine. It's inconvenient, but it doesn't hurt. Compared to what we were about to discuss, my left hand was hardly noteworthy.
Oh, okay. Huh?
She muttered in confusion, unable to find who she was looking for as she took a seat.
Before we proceed, would it not be appropriate to serve the guests some tea?
Yeah, you're right. This is going to take a while, so please do.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should be the one doing that. Let me help out. Not at all, mistress. Stay here.
Entrusted with the task, Aisha immediately set to work. She prepared enough tea for everyone, gathered their luggage in one place, and hung up their coats, wet from the snow. She offered everyone slippers to use, taking their damp shoes and setting them to dry by the fireplace. I sat unmoving and merely watched her do all of this. It wasn't just me watching either. Lilia was also observing her daughter closely. Come to think of it, Lilia had always been the one doing this kind of work back in Rapan, but now, in the deathly silence, she stayed put, not lifting a finger. That was a rare sight.
Aisha,
Yes, what is it, Mother?
it seems you're attending to your duties properly and not causing trouble for your brother.
Yes.
You may be related to Lord Rudeus by blood, but it was he who saved your life. Keep that in mind as you continue to carry out your duties as his maid.
Yes, Mother.
It didn't feel right to hear a parent and child talk like that. This was their first time seeing each other in a while. I felt like they should be, well, warmer toward each other. Then again, perhaps Lilia was just restraining herself. The conversation to come was going to be a painful one after all. Since everyone is gathered, why don't we start? My heart felt heavy, but it was my duty to speak. Paul was no longer here to do it for me.
But Father isn't here yet.
Would she be angry when she learned, I wondered? Before I left, she clung to me, crying for me to help him. I told her to leave everything to me. She would probably blame me when she learned he was dead. It was fine if she did. I was the one who'd failed to grant her wish. I glanced around at everyone and then said, Our father is. Paul Greyrat is dead.
Huh.
Sylphie lowered her head, the heartbreak playing on her face. Aisha's eyes went wide, her fists curling up tight. This is what he left behind, I said, setting out his equipment piece by piece on the table. His sword, his short sword, his armor, and his remains. Just those 4 things.
What? Why? But you went! Why did he die?
I'm sorry. I wasn't strong enough.
But you're...
Norn stepped close, as if perhaps she intended to grab me by the collar, but her fury suddenly lost steam. I could see my left hand, or rather, lack thereof, reflected in her eyes. Her gaze shifted between that, Paul's leftover belongings, and my face, and tears began to slowly well up in her eyes. I covered my left wrist with my right hand and continued. I'll explain in more detail right now.
Okay?
Aisha strode up behind her, grabbing her by the shoulder.
For now? Enough! I know!
Norn smacked her hand away and stalked back to her seat. Aisha stood idle for a moment before returning to her position behind Sylphie. All right, I'll explain from the beginning. I summarized everything that had happened. How Ella Nihilus and I set out for Rapan and reunited with Paul and the others there. How, based on information we had about Zenith's whereabouts, we dove into the teleportation labyrinth together and started mapping it out. I told them how things went smoothly until we ran up against the Guardian. How the ensuing fight had been so rough that I'd lost my hand and Paul had lost his life. That although we'd succeeded in rescuing Zenith, she'd become a husk. Geese interjected intermittently to supply additional information, as I slowly worked my way through it all.
So that means you weren't able to save Mother or Father.
That's right. I felt like I could see her hackles rise the moment I nodded, but she didn't explode on me. Instead, she bit her lower lip and stared at my left hand.
Did you do everything you could?
Yeah, I gave it all I had.
If you tried that hard and you still failed, then it wouldn't have mattered I'm sure it wouldn't have mattered. Father is gone. Why? Why?
She began to sob, large droplets streaming down her cheeks. Norn was crying loudly, in a voice that pierced me right through the heart. Everyone present wore grave expressions as they listened, and her body shook as she sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. She cried all the tears that the rest of us hadn't, and we just listened as she did so. Hick. Wow. After a while, she stopped. Her eyes were swollen and bright red. Strangled noises kept escaping her throat. But she turned to me, her eyes filled with determination.
Big brother?
Yes, what is it?
This sword, can I have it?
Norn pointed a finger toward Paul's favorite weapon, the one he'd had with him since before I was born, the one he always kept on him, the one that had never left his side. Yeah, sure, you should take it. Just don't use it recklessly. Don't mistake having that sword as a sign that you've suddenly gotten stronger. It had been on my 5th birthday that Paul handed me a sword and said the very same thing to me.
I understand,
She said, hugging it close to her chest. She was strong. It wouldn't be unusual for a child her age to hole up in their room and cry, but she was facing Paul's death head-on, completely unlike me, who couldn't even crawl back to my feet without Roxy's help. Truly, she was strong. We decided to split his other mementos up amongst our family. Aisha chose his short sword, and I chose his armor. As for his remains, we would build a proper grave for him and bury him there. At least that was the plan until Zenith drifted forward and took his armor into her hands.
Ah, Mother!
I called out to her, but she didn't respond. As usual, she just stared blankly ahead like a husk. And yet, she'd moved as if she understood what was going on here. Or was that just a coincidence? No, perhaps the core of who she was still remained. Regardless, it meant that I was left with nothing of his, but I was satisfied with that. I'd received so much from him already. Well then, let's talk about Mother next. Once again, I explained Zenith's condition to them, that she had lost her memories and seemed almost completely empty inside.
She won't get better?
I shook my head. I don't know. I intended to have doctors and healers examine her to be sure, but I'd never heard of healing magic that could restore lost memories. Honestly, we didn't even know the root cause of her condition. We knew she'd been encased in a magically imbued crystal and lost her memories, but that was it. It might well be something akin to oxygen deficiency. I was certain of nothing, of course, but I did think the chances of curing her condition were slim. If there was damage to her brain, then the medical technology of this world wouldn't be enough to fix her. Even advanced tier healing magic hadn't done anything. I'd read a manga or two where inflicting the same level of shock that had made a person lose their memories in the first place snapped them back to normal, but we couldn't test that out on Zenith. Besides, I wasn't sure she'd be happy even if we did cure her. Paul had died trying to save her. I was sure she'd blame herself, saying, if only he hadn't tried to help me. Maybe she was better off not remembering. No, that wasn't right. We should work to restore her memories. Anyway, she'll need treatment and care. I planned for her to live here with us. If my parents in my previous life had lived, grown old, and become bedridden, would I have looked after them the same way? Lilia had initially said she planned to rent separate living quarters so that they wouldn't impede on my life. She'd earned enough from the teleportation labyrinth to live on for over a decade in this town. I'd shot that idea down flat. I wouldn't allow such a thing. Paul wouldn't allow such a thing. It was our duty as her remaining family to look after her. I plan to entrust her care to Miss Lilia, but I am sure everyone will end up having to lend a hand.
Very well. I will do my best to help out too.
No one seemed to disagree, not that I intended to let them. Paul had told me to save Zenith even if it killed me. Even now I didn't truly know what he'd meant by that. But now that he was gone, it was up to me to protect her. Besides, though I'd said she needed treatment, it wasn't as though she had Alzheimer's. She was just more or less an empty husk. With Lilia by her side at all times, I was sure she'd be fine, though I would need to gather the necessary supplies for her care.
So that means Mother will be living here as well?
Yes, Aisha. I will be in Lord Rudeus' service.
I wondered if Aisha saw Lilia as a thorn in her side. Lilia had been a strict disciplinarian when she was growing up, and I'd gotten the sense Aisha enjoyed living away from her mother. Still, I didn't feel like it was appropriate for her to express her displeasure here. If she did voice such complaints, I would have to chastise her accordingly.
Will we be splitting the work as well?
We can discuss that later. I intend to make the mistress' care my primary focus, leaving the majority of the household work to you, Aisha.
All right.
Aisha didn't protest, but it did look like she was uncomfortable with her mother present. Her voice was stiff, her expression gloomy.
Hey, Aisha, you don't have to hold back on our account, okay?
Aisha glanced at Norn, then at Lilia, then at me, then again at Lilia and back at me. I wasn't sure why she was looking to me for approval or what she was looking for approval for, but I nodded nonetheless. Aisha hopped to her feet and threw her arms around Lilia.
Mother, I'm so glad you're safe.
She bawled, burying her face in Lilia's stomach.
I'm home now, Aisha.
Lilia's expression turned gentle as she stroked her daughter's head. Ah, yes, it all made sense. Aisha had to have felt conflicted. Lilia was her mother, after all. I was sure she'd prayed for Paul and Zenith's well-being, too, but it was Lilia's safety she'd prayed for above all others. And now that she had returned safely, it was under circumstances too grim for Aisha to express her joy sincerely. Forgive me for doubting you, Aisha. We talked about a variety of things after that, concluding our return announcement. The conversation had included Geese's financial report proving that we'd come out in the black, not that our newly deep pockets had done anything to brighten the cloudy expressions on everyone's faces.
Well then, guess we ought to be off to look for an inn.
As soon as we were finished, Geese took to his feet. Talhand, Vieira, and Shiera followed his lead. I don't mind if you stay here with us today.
What, boss? Don't be stupid. We've got brains enough to know we'd just be getting in the way of your family here.
The other three seemed to agree, moving to retrieve their luggage, pulling on their still damp shoes and coats. In the end, I decided to see them off at the front entrance, and as I watched the four of them recede, I called out again. Everyone, thank you for all the assistance you provided my father all this time. Vieira and Shiera, in particular, bowed their heads deep. They had helped Paul ever since his time in Miletian. I hadn't spoken with them very much, but they'd supported us in myriad ways as we dove in and out of the teleportation labyrinth. They were the heroes behind the scenes.
No, we should be the ones apologizing for not being more helpful.
We'd appreciate if you'd let us know where the
Their replies were short. I wondered what Paul had been to them. They'd followed him to the Begarit continent even after the Fitto search and rescue squad disbanded. Perhaps they'd had special feelings for him, but even if they'd loved him, it was all over now. What will you do now?
Once winter is over, we'll return to the Asura Kingdom. There are other people from the search and rescue squad to whom we are indebted.
I see. Well, take care.
You as well, Lord Rudeus. I know you have a lot on your shoulders from here on out, but take care of yourself.
They bowed their heads to me one final time before disappearing into the curtain of falling snow. The search and rescue squad. Oh yeah! Hadn't someone said something about Zenith's family helping finance Paul's activities? Zenith wasn't exactly what you'd call safe and sound, but we should still inform them that she'd been found. I could at least pen them a letter. As I was preoccupied with those thoughts, Geese slapped my shoulder from behind.
Well, see ya, boss.
Mr. Geese, Mr. Talhand.
What? Wipe that gloomy look off your face. What will you both be doing after this?
Geese scratched his head.
We plan to head as far as Asura. We want to exchange our Begarit currency and sell these magic items we got.
You're gonna sell all of them?
Plan to keep a few to use ourselves, but for the most part, yeah.
Geese still had one in hand. They'd inform me of what the items did when they appraised them, but most were nothing special. Just random stuff like a short sword that could be used in place of a match. I figured I might find a use for them eventually, so I tossed them into our basement storage area. No matter how ridiculous the effects, they would still fetch us some money if we were ever in a pinch. The magic stones that absorbed mana were a separate matter. I wanted to research them once I had the time. If I faced a similar opponent in the future, I didn't want a repeat of the Labyrinth. I didn't want to be powerless. I might not be skilled enough to get anything out of researching the stones, but I'd rather try than just give up.
If you want, we can take your items along with us to sell in Asura. You'll get a lot more bang for your buck there than you would here, you know?
Asura did have a steep price for commodities, and their currency was accepted widely across the central continent. If you were going to sell something, Asura was the place to do it. And let me guess, on the way back here, you'll gamble it all away and make a run for it?
Hey, no way! I wouldn't put my hands on your money, boss.
His eyes darted back and forth, not looking at me. Perhaps he really did plan to gamble the money away. Well, if not for Geese, we would have never made it through that labyrinth in the first place. I owed him an enormous debt. This was trivial by comparison. I'm kidding.
Well, I did plan to gamble some of it.
And after that?
Going to continue as an adventurer. Those are the only skills we got.
All right.
Well, we'll be here until spring, so come drink with us when you've got the time. You said you'd introduce me to a nice female monkey, yeah? I guess since you got a wife and kid on the way, you probably don't frequent those kind of places.
True, we wouldn't be seeing the last of each other just yet. Even so, Geese was the kind of man who'd just up and leave on his next adventure without a word in advance. I wanted to at least say my farewells while I had the opportunity. Mr. Geese.
Boss, you talking all funny, you know? Talk to me like you always do. Like, hey, newbie.
Why are you so particular about being called newbie?
It's a jinx.
A jinx. That word alone should have been an inadequate explanation, but it hit me straight in the heart. If it was one of his jinxes, I couldn't complain. Well, either way, thank you both for everything you've done up until now.
I told ya. No need. Anyway, take care, boss.
Once I bowed my head low, Geese waved his hand and started to walk off.
He's right. You don't owe us anything. If anyone does, it'd be Paul. What I mean is, we don't need any thanks.
I watched until they disappeared. Men always want to show off like that, said a voice. I glanced over to see Ellen Eiley standing beside me. Apparently she'd been talking to Sylphie while I was bidding them farewell. I wondered if it was about Roxy. I told her I had a duty to tell Sylphie everything, but being the busybody that she was, Ellen Eiley's might have put in a few words for me. Honestly, I wasn't anxious to have that conversation, so I was grateful for her consideration.
Well then, I should be off to see Cliff. I don't have much time left.
Ellen I stroked her lower abdomen as she spoke. I'd put her through a lot, too. On our way here and back, she'd slept with a total of 3 different strangers. This was normal for her, of course, and she'd laughed it off, but I couldn't be so flippant. Miss Ellen Eiley, you were really there for me.
I'm sorry about Paul.
No, that was my mistake, my carelessness. At least, I tried to say as much, but she cut in first.
It was my duty in that party to make sure things like that didn't happen. Paul died because of my shortcomings.
There was no way that was true. We'd been fighting for our lives back there. None of us could have known what lay in wait after we dodged the Hydra's ultimate attack and were a single head away from victory. There were only 2 people who could blame her, Ellen Eiley herself and the deceased Paul. I can't blame you, or anyone else.
Then don't blame yourself either.
All right.
Okay, time for me to get going.
Eleanor said before dashing out into the snow. There was someone important still waiting to hear that she'd returned. I let out a long sigh, my breath turning into a visible plume that rose and dissipated amidst the snow. At last, the displacement incident was over, at least for me. All my missing family members had been found. There were probably other victims out there still missing, but I had no obligation to search for them. It was over. It was the conclusion of a long, frustrating, bitter journey. Now life could move on to the next stage. No looking back. I had to live on and look ahead. There was still so much I had to do in this world. So much I still wanted to do. So, let's look to the future.
Rudy, has everyone already left? I also wanted to talk to them a bit.
It seems they're staying in the city for now, so you can see them against when you have time.
True.
Roxy didn't step out into the snow. She remained in the house, the only member of the party who'd done so. Whether she continued to stay here or left to find a room at an inn depended on how our impending discussion went. Well, Roxy, let's do this.
Yes?
I stepped back inside Roxy's petite form, following along beside me. Chapter 15, Carnage. 5 people remained in the living area. Sylphie, Norn, Aisha, Roxy, and myself. There was also the armadillo, Dillo, as I'd named him, sprawled out by the fireplace with a look of bliss on its face, but you could hardly count it among our number. Lilia was helping Zenith into the bath. Before entering, she'd come to ask me if it was all right, and I'd nodded. I wanted to get through this discussion without relying on her aid. Rather than return to her room, Norn lingered. She was having a rough time of it, still audibly sniffing. She'd been incredibly attached to Paul and was taking the loss exceptionally hard. Well, there is one last thing I have to talk about. When I said as much, the 3 of them returned to their seats. I exchanged looks with Roxy, who quietly wandered over beside me. Seeing how swollen Sylphie's belly was made me hesitate. But I had a responsibility. Eventually, Roxy would be in the same state of pregnancy. If Sylphie refused to take her in, would Roxy give birth all by herself? That was the agreement we'd made, but if that really did happen, then I planned to support her, however I could, financially or otherwise. I'd like to take Roxy as my second wife.
Huh? What are you talking about?
The one who voiced her confusion wasn't Sylphie, but rather Norn. Sylphie just had a blank look on her face. Let me explain everything in order. I started by recounting what had happened on the Bagarit continent, how Paul had died and I'd fallen into a deep depression as a result. I told them how Roxy had been the one to save me, and that I developed feelings for her as a result. How I deeply respected her and wanted her to become a part of our family now. It wasn't my intention to betray Sylphie, but in the end, I did break my promise. I'm sorry. I got down on my knees. There was a rug stretched out across the floor, but the winters in the northern territories were cold, so naturally the carpet was as well. I bent forward and pressed my head to the floor.
Huh? Why, Rudy?
I still love Sylphie just as much as before, but it seems I may have gotten Roxy pregnant. I need to take responsibility for that. The more I spoke, the cheaper my words sounded, even though they really were my true feelings. When I peered up, Sylphie had a troubled look on her face. Perhaps she was confused. I couldn't blame her for that. I told her that I loved her, sworn I'd come back no matter what. Now I'd returned in shambles minus a family member in my left hand. She might have thought she could at least rejoice because I was safe, but here I was, saying I wanted to take another woman as my wife. In her place, I would have wailed, screamed, and lashed out. But still, I asked for the impossible. Sylphie, please forgive me.
There's no way she can. How can you say that? Do you know how she felt the entire time she was waiting for you to come home?
The one who shrieked back at me was Norn, not Sylphie. She stomped right over and grabbed me by the collar of my shirt.
Every day she said, I hope Rudy is okay. And I miss Rudy. And I wonder if Rudy's eating right now. Do you know how lonely she looked? How lonely she sounded the whole time?
I didn't know. I didn't know at all. But I could imagine it. The expression on her face as she waited for me. How lonely she sounded. How she might sit in a chair with nothing else to do but tap her foot as she waited.
I figured I couldn't blame you for not being able to save Father. If things were so rough you even lost your left hand, then there was nothing anyone could do. So it seemed wrong to blame you for it. But now you're telling me you had enough composure during all of that to have sex with another woman? And now you want to make her your wife.
No, I wasn't composed at all. I was depressed. That's why Roxy put her own feelings on the line to save me.
Miss Sylphie would have done the same thing for you if she'd been there?
Of course, Sylphie would have saved me had she been there. She'd cured my impotence, after all. But the one who actually saved me was Roxy. Even though she had feelings for me, even though she knew I already had someone, she'd resolved to do it, even knowing she might be tossed aside afterward. Norn, you should understand how it feels, locking yourself in your room, feeling like you're so deep inside a hole you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. How are you supposed to cast aside the person who saved you from that?
I do know. I'm grateful to you for helping me through that, but this is a totally separate matter. Lord Millis would never permit someone taking a second wife.
Oh, that's right. Norn was a follower of Millis. No, her religion wasn't the issue here. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I was doing something wrong and trying to strong-arm my way into being in the right.
Besides, why that tiny girl? She's not any different from me.
Norn glared at Roxy. Roxy returned the younger girl's gaze with her usual poker face. She was taller than Norn, but barely so, maybe even less than centimeters worth. In the face of my younger sister's hostile gaze, Roxy remained unfazed as she muttered,
I may be small, but I'm still an adult.
I wondered what she was going to say. Her voice trembled, an open door into her heart, but the words were such that they could be construed as impertinent.
If you're such an adult, don't you feel like you're being shameless? Don't you feel bad for barging into their relationship?
Norn, that's going too far. I'm the one who said I wanted to bring her into our family. Roxy's done nothing wrong. She's the one who tried to back out of it.
You stay quiet. Besides, if she really did try to back out, then why is she still here, clinging to you? She's just taking advantage of your offer.
I honestly thought about slapping her, and it went without saying I didn't have the right to do such a thing. If I slapped her, I felt like I really would be complete scum. Roxy fell silent as Norn shouted her down. She looked as indifferent as usual. Her eyes turned to the floor. Finally, she lifted her head up and bowed it toward Norn.
You're right. It is shameless of me. I apologize.
Then she stood up straight and drifted over to the edge of the room. She picked up her luggage, placed her hat on her head, and moved quickly toward the exit. I couldn't even stop her. I knew we'd face resistance, knew not to underestimate how difficult it would be for everyone to accept this, but I thought I could convince them. That had been naive. Now here we were, and Roxy had been lambasted for her part. She probably felt like she was walking on a bed of nails, and things might keep being that painful for her if she stayed here. No one would choose to stay with that possibility in mind. Even I would race for the door, unable to withstand it. I couldn't let her leave here with such a bitter taste in her mouth. That wasn't how I wanted this to end. I wanted to repay her for everything she'd done, not bring her here just so she could be dragged through the mud. I brought her here so I could make her happy. And yet, no matter how I felt, I couldn't stop her. I couldn't hold her back. Maybe I couldn't make her happy? No, think! Roxy would be out the door any second now. I at least needed to stop her, even if it meant slapping Norn, even if it meant making my little sister hate me.
Wait! Miss Roxy, please wait.
It was Sylphie. She took to her feet and hurried over, grabbing Roxy by the hand. Roxy glanced back, her eyes welling up with tears.
Why are you stopping her? Just let her go. Norn, could you please be quiet? Huh? You were being far too harsh this whole time. I never expressed any objections.
Norn froze at a loss for words. Please sit, Sylphie said, turning her back on Norn in favor of guiding Roxy to a place on the sofa. Roxy perched herself atop it willingly with no signs of resistance. Then Sylphie took a place beside her.
I was a little confused at first, so it seems you're the one who saved Rudy, Miss Roxy.
Roxy tentatively nodded.
Yes. But I did have an ulterior motive, and I don't intend to make any excuses for that.
Yes. Well, Rudy is really handsome. I wouldn't have believed you if you'd said you didn't have any ulterior motives. I think if I had been in your place, I'd have done the exact same thing.
Sylphie smiled at Roxy, a gentle expression on her face. Roxy's was stiff in contrast. Sylphie kept smiling as she continued.
To be honest, I figured it was just a matter of time.
What was a matter of time?
Rudy bringing home another woman.
Just a matter of time before I brought another girl? Wait, did this mean she actually didn't trust me?
You know Rudy's a pervert, right? I figured he'd do it with someone else if I wasn't around. But he's loyal, so I figured if he did do it with someone else, he would want to bring her into our family, just like he did with me. I didn't think I'd be able to have him all to myself forever.
I wanted to protest, but she completely hit the bullseye. I had no right to say anything.
Honestly, I figured if he was going to bring anyone home, it would be Linnea, Priscina, or Miss Nanahoshi.
I've not heard those names, except for Miss Nanahoshi.
They're his friends at school. They're all very sexy, with huge breasts.
Well, Nanahoshi isn't necessarily that sexy, I protested inwardly. Wait, that doesn't matter right now.
Truthfully, what I heard of your trip sounded brutal, and there was Paul's death as well. I completely forgot the possibility he might have hooked up with someone else. That's why I was so surprised when I heard. But it does make sense.
What does?
Ever since you got here, you've been staring over at him with an anxious look on your face. I wondered what that was all about. At first, I thought it was because you were nervous about him announcing Paul's death. But this is what it was actually all about. You had the eyes of a woman in love, Miss Roxy.
The eyes of a woman in love. When Roxy heard that, her face heated up.
I'm sorry for making you witness something so unpleasant.
She lowered her head, cheeks still red as a tomato. From a wife's point of view, it couldn't be pleasant to watch another woman look lovingly at her husband. I could understand Roxy thinking that way.
But Sylphie nearly shook her head. It wasn't unpleasant.
But
how should I put this? You know, Rudy always talked to me about you, Miss Roxy.
what did he say?
Things like she's the only magician I respect. He talked the same way about you before the displacement incident as well as after.
I'm not sure what to say, but I feel bad you had to hear that.
Well, that was why I did feel a bit jealous as well. He had such admiration in his eyes every time he talked about you. I thought to myself, this Roxy Magurdia person is such an incredible magician. There is no way I could ever stand shoulder to shoulder with her. But now that I've actually seen you and know you're just a normal girl who loves Rudy, that jealousy is gone. That means you're just the same as me.
Sylphie said as she lifted Roxy's hat away and caressed her face. Roxy just stared back at the other woman and let it happen. And as she continued stroking, Sylphie said,
Norn may have expressed her opposition, but I welcome you.
Roxy's face colored with surprise. I too felt my jaw drop in shock. I'd never dreamed Sylphie would accept it so easily.
Sylphiette. Miss.
Just Sylphie is fine. I hope we'll get along. Rox?
I'm actually 50 years old as of this year, so that kind of nickname sounds a bit too childish.
Oh, all right. You're older than me then. Sorry about that. Now that I think about it, Rudy did mention that. But seeing you, it just didn't register.
Well, I am petite.
I'm not all that big myself.
The two of them looked at one another, holding hands, and laughed.
Well, Roxy, let's support Rudy together then.
Thank you, Sylphie.
After they shared those words, they shook hands. The gesture radiated a curious sort of solidarity, and seeing it, I let out a sigh of relief. An unconscious reaction that slipped from me the moment I thought things would be okay. Norn glanced at me and furrowed her brows.
If Miss Sylphie is accepting of it, then I have nothing.
Apparently, she wasn't quite on board yet. She frowned slightly, clearly still displeased, as she glared over at us. Perhaps I had earned her contempt once again.
Forgive him, Norn. Rudy's not a follower of Millis. But Mr. Paul had 2 wives as well, didn't he?
She went quiet for a moment before saying,
True, he did. Would you say the same kind of things to Miss Lilia then?
Norn's eyes widened in surprise. She turned to look at Aisha, who was sitting beside her. Aisha had been quiet the whole time, her face the picture of composure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Aisha.
It's fine, really. I know you often say things without thinking them through. Why do you have to put it like that? Look what just happened. That wasn't your place to speak. You kept going on about Miss Sylphie and her feelings, but really, you were just forcing your beliefs on everyone else.
What?
Norn hopped to her feet. I saw the fists at her side and jumped in to scold Aisha. Aisha, you went too far.
But
I cut her off. I understand what Norn is saying, too. If Sylphie had said the same things herself, it would have been understandable. I'm equally at fault for not considering how everyone would feel. We can't blame Norn.
well, I guess, if you say so.
Norn had a conflicted look on her face, as if unsure what to say. She must have felt uncomfortable standing there, because her next words were,
I'm going to bed.
Her feet were quick as she moved to duck out of the living room, but then she stopped, as if she just remembered something, and looked back at me.
Big brother?
What is it? Was she going to say make one last scathing remark? That was my fear, but what came out of Norn's mouth next defied my expectations.
Would you teach me swordsmanship? When you have the time.
Huh? It was so sudden that for a moment the words made no sense to me. Swordsmanship, was she going to try using Paul's sword? Part of me felt like a half-baked attempt at self-defense would only be self-destructive at best, but this world wasn't like my previous one. It might probably do her some good to learn swordsmanship. Even a little power was better than none. The bigger issue was whether I would be any good as a teacher. Are you sure you want me to teach you?
I can't approve of what you've done, but I don't hate you either.
Okay. I'd actually been asking if she was sure she wanted me to teach her when I'd only dabbled in the art myself, but I couldn't turn her down now that she'd indirectly admitted she still liked me. All right, I'll make time to teach you after school or something.
Please do.
Once she said that, Norn was off to her bedroom on the second floor. In the end, I'd been absolutely helpless. Sylphie had rescued me with her generosity.
Big brother, you look really pathetic right now, you know?
Unable to say anything in my defense, I just nodded. After that, the three of us, Sylphie, Roxy, and I, began talking about how things would work from now on, such as the order in which we'd spend our nights together, and how we'd negotiate quality time. The discussion was frank enough that Aisha took her leave.
Well then, Miss Roxy, I look forward to living together.
Yes, me too.
Aisha grumbled under her breath as she went, but she was smiling even as she did so. What was up with her? Well, whatever. Sylphie, Roxy, and I had the future to discuss. Some people might be aghast we could discuss such things when Paul had just died, but that was precisely why I wanted a more cheerful topic of conversation.
Please make Sylvie your main priority, Rudy. Just a little bit of your attention when you have the free time is enough for me.
Nonsense. We must be fair. He may yet take on more wives. So let's not be bashful.
More? I could tell how little faith she had in my lower half from that word alone.
Honestly, right now I just feel overwhelmed with guilt about this whole thing. I'll just stay on the sidelines until your baby is born.
So that's how you feel. Well, there is only a little more than a month until the delivery. You don't mind if I take all that time for myself?
I don't. Then let's wait until next month for me to officially become your wife, Rudy.
I was probably an awful person for finding it a disappointment that I'd have to live the celibate life for the next month. But when I started to think about how I'd be able to have sex with both of them, as much as I wanted after Sylphie gave birth, my buddy downstairs began to rise up and salute. As those fantasies solidified in my head, both women turned their gazes toward me.
Rudy? If you absolutely can't wait, let me know, okay? We'll do something about it.
Oh no, I'll take care of it myself. No matter how much of a horn dog I wasn't going to cheat any more than I already had. I wanted her to trust that Rudeus Greyrat, would not falter again. The only reason I had wavered was because of the unique situation I'd been in, and because my partner was Roxy. As long as I never wound up in a depressive spiral and had a woman of Roxy's caliber appear before me, I'd never cheat again. Ever.
Oh, but you said Roxy is pregnant as well. In that case, if we wait a month, you won't be able to have sex with her either. What'll we do then?
About what Rudy said regarding that. I think he was lying. I didn't get the opportunity to say as much, but I'm not actually pregnant.
Huh? She wasn't? Then what the heck was Elenilis talking about before? Oh, she baited me right into a trap. That jerk. Damn it. And I danced right into the palm of her hand.
What is it, Rudy?
Nothing, but let me just clear the air and say I wasn't lying. It was just a misunderstanding on my part.
Oh, all right then. But I look forward to it, someday.
Oh, yeah, me too. The words, happy family planning, came to mind, putting a smile on my face. I truly was looking forward to what was to come.
Rudy's a perv, isn't he?
Yes, I certainly am.
I wonder what our pervy Rudy is going to do to me.
We continued to talk and laugh together, and that was how I came to have a second wife. We prepared a room for Lilia and my mother after they finished their bath. Then we retired for the night. Just as we'd previously discussed, I was spending the night with Sylphie. I made a pillow for her with my arm and we nestled close, her body facing mine, but we had yet to fall asleep. We were both gazing at one another quietly.
About our conversation before. I had something absolute tragic pictured in my mind when you said you had something to talk about and you had Roxy standing beside you.
What's that?
I thought you might tell me that you couldn't love me anymore and you wanted me to leave.
I would never say that. What kind of sleazebag would say something like that?
Yeah, I know.
Sylphie rustled around. I could feel something press against the stump where my left hand had once been. Sylphie's fingers, she was stroking it.
But I was still anxious. I don't know why. I just got the feeling you weren't going to come back to me.
A sense of foreboding? Well, this had been quite the close call. It wouldn't have been surprising if I had died. Did I worry you?
Yes.
It's okay now. I stroked her head with my right hand. Her eyes crinkled as she leaned into my touch. Her hair was a beautiful pale color. It had grown while I was gone. Your hair is getting longer.
Because you said you like long hair.
You're doing it for me?
Yeah.
She'd waited for me this entire time, and I'd been stupid enough to... I'm sorry, Sylphie, for breaking my promise to you.
She shook her head. It's fine. I love you the way you are.
But if you'd done the same to me, I would have screamed and cried like a baby and lashed out at you for betraying me. I know I would.
Hee. But I wouldn't do that to you. I don't have eyes for anyone but you, Rudy.
Sylphie pressed her face close, pecking me on the cheek. A wave of affection came bubbling up from within my chest. I would love Sylphie for the rest of my life. She must have been worried, must have wanted to wail at me, and still, she accepted everything without a single complaint. Sylphie.
He.
As repayment for her kiss, I gave her one of my own, planting my lips against her soft, squishy cheek. Normally this was the prelude for our lovemaking, but we'd stop here for today. I couldn't push her body, not when it was heavy with child. But just then, I felt something wriggle against my lower abdomen. Come on, Sylphie, we can't do that. If you start touching me down there, I'm not going to be able to hold off. I mean, I am interested in pregnancy sex, but...
No, we can't, Rudy. It wouldn't be good for the baby. Huh?
Suddenly, we both looked down. There, just beside Sylphie's swollen belly, was a dense, mountainous lump. We folded the blanket back to discover Dillo! The enormous armadillo had slipped its head in from the base of the bed, just between Sylphie and myself. When had this thing gotten in here? I hadn't even noticed it enter. Pervy little thing, sticking its head in people's crotches.
Just like you, Rudy.
No, well, I guess you can sleep with us for tonight.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I slipped out of bed, produced a second blanket, and created a spot on the floor beside our bed for Dillo to sleep in. It sprawled out across it and closed its eyes. The creature had the appearance of an armadillo, but it was basically like a large dog. We'd have to build it a kennel down the road. Keeping it inside was all well and good, but it'd be a pain if it started crapping in here. Wait, I guess we could always just train it to be housebroken like a dog. Well, that was a conversation we could have later as a family. Shall we go to sleep? I started to slip back into bed on Sylphie's right, but stopped and returned to her left instead, so I could hold her hand with my right one. She gave it a powerful squeeze. Good night, Sylphie.
Yeah, glad you're home, Rudy.
And then I was out like a light. Chapter 16, Before His Grave. A few days had passed since I took Roxy as my wife. Lately, my fear that another disaster was about to strike had gradually begun to fade. The future seemed brighter than that, though I had still had a lot of concerns about Zenith. She had claimed one of the other large bedrooms in the house for herself. I'd advised Lilia against it, given that the previous resident of this house had been killed in there, but Zenith had taken a liking to it and refused to leave. Seeing that, Lilia brushed off my concerns, saying, "I'm sure there's nothing to worry about." It was true that if she was going to look after Zenith, a spacious room would be preferable to a cramped one. I also took Zenith to a doctor, one of the Renoa Kingdom's most prominent practitioners, referred to us by Ariel. Unfortunately, the man threw his hands up, saying he had no idea what kind of medical issue she had, and therefore no idea how to treat it. With the current medical technology in this world, there really was nothing they could do to restore her memories. Perhaps it was because of healing magic that the medical treatment in this world went. Regardless, we took steps to draw up a rehabilitation plan formulated specifically for someone with amnesia. I didn't know if it would help, but it was better than doing nothing. If I had the opportunity, it might be a good idea to search for a magical implement that could help with recovering memories. Granted, I had no idea if such a thing even existed. It was probably best to consider her treatment a long-term endeavor. I had no idea what her family back in the holy country of Milis would say about this either. Everything remained uncertain. Sylphie's progress was right on schedule. When I tried to grope at her swollen breasts, she got pretty angry with me. Apparently it hurt if I grabbed too hard. The way she implored me to be gentle made me want to jump her bones. I'd bought into her temptations many times before and had my way with her, but she was pregnant this time, so I couldn't let my desires go unfiltered. I couldn't help wanting to touch her just the same, but I was cautious gentle as I caressed her. Pregnancy brought changes to the body. Her breasts were no longer the ones I was accustomed to fondling, and when I considered how I had been the one to bring about this change to her body, I felt indescribable joy. This was probably what people meant when they talked about a sense of domination. Ah, Sylphie's all mine. But, as you might have guessed, having no left hand sucked. I thought longingly of the days I could grope her chest with both hands. Now that I was missing one, my satisfaction was halved. Soon her breasts would begin to produce milk. I suspected she'd be cross with me if I asked a taste test. Maybe she'd even scorn me. But it might be worth asking, even if the odds were against me. It was probably in my best interest to keep the question to myself. But just once couldn't hurt.
You sure do love my breasts?
Yeah, I do. They're tiny, but they're the best in the world.
Best in the world? Can you really say that after you've groped Roxy's?
Forgive me for my sins.
Hee, I'm not angry.
We engaged in playful banter, our relationship as strong as ever. If this had been my previous world, more specifically Japan, our relationship would have probably been quite strained. But in this world, Sylphie was understanding. As long as I loved them equally, I could have 2 or 3 wives. As for my other wife, Roxy had taken up one of the smaller rooms on the 2nd floor. The smallest, to be exact. I suggested she pick a more spacious one, but she apparently liked cramped spaces, which I understood. I didn't mind them either. Roxy became a professor at the university. At the same time, I went around introducing her to everyone and announcing my return, but we'll save that story for another time. Another month passed, and finally, on a day with heavy snow, Sylphie gave birth. It was a normal delivery with no real complications, neither breech nor premature. The only issue was that the blizzard outside was so strong that the doctor we called couldn't make it in time. In my previous world, that would have been a cause for panic, but fortunately, we had Lilia. As someone experienced in delivering babies, she was able to move swiftly, with Aisha as her assistant, never asking me for a thing. She performed each step carefully, walking Aisha through the process. Roxy and I were on the sidelines in case anything happened. If an emergency arose, healing magic would be our ace in the hole. Although, notedly, my nerves were completely shot. Healing wasn't even in my head at that point. It was all I could do to grip Sylphie's hand in mine as her face contorted in pain.
Seeing you like this brings back memories of when the mistress gave birth to Norn.
That gave me flashbacks too. Norn had been a breech baby, with both mother and baby in danger during delivery. Paul had been useless, completely choked up. I'd managed to keep my cool and assist the delivery back then, but look at me now. I'd been much more capable in the past than I was now, not much different than how I'd been in my previous world.
Don't worry, Mr. Sylphie will be just fine. There's no need to stress.
Lilia said as she worked briskly, handling everything with such practiced expertise that I was floored. But no matter how she tried to soothe my nerves, my mind wouldn't settle. The only thing I could do was cling to Sylphie's hand and say, "Breathe in and out. In and out." Wiping the sweat from her brow as I did so. The anguish on her face was clear, even as she giggled in the face of my panic.
Rudy, you can relax a little, you know.
Aisha snorted with a laugh of her own, which earned her a swift smack from Lilia. Sylphie watched the two of them and giggled again. Gee! Just! As the room seemed to relax, the first wave came.
Mr. Sylphie, we're ready now. Push.
Ninny, you.
I watched quietly as she struggled. The only thing I could say was, "You can do this." I felt like there was something I should be doing, too, but there wasn't anything I could do. Sylphie matched Lilia's calls to push, her face clenching each time, until the baby was born. She let forth a fierce cry as she was delivered safely into our world. A little girl, an adorable one with the same hair color as me. Lilia lifted her up and handed her to Sylphie, who held the newborn tight and sighed with relief.
I'm so glad. Her hair's not green.
I mussed Sylphie's hair that had once been green but was now a beautiful white. Yeah. Even if our baby had been born with green hair, I wouldn't have blamed Sylphie for it. How could I? Green was my favorite color in this world, the color of both Sylphie's hair and Rudeus. Even Roxy's in the right lighting would shine emerald. I loved green. If someone wanted to discriminate against green hair, they'd have to go through me. I'd face them even if it meant making an enemy of the whole world. You did wonderful, Sylphie.
Thanks.
While I had the resolve to love green hair, the rest of the world did not, considering it an ill omen. I thank God for our good fortune that my daughter had the same hair color as me. Speaking of God, she was actually in the neighboring room with a staff gripped firmly in her hands, looking pale as a sheet.
Here, Rudy, hold her.
Okay. I took her in my arms. Her body was warm, her voice fierce as she cried. Her head was tiny, along with her mouth and nose, her entire body overflowing with life. My heart flooded with emotion when I thought about how this little girl was mine, my baby that Sylphie had given birth to. Tears sprung up. Paul was gone, but now we had a baby. He'd saved my life. If it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't be here holding my child. But in exchange, Paul would never again hold his own wife, his own daughters, or his grandchild. Would he be bitter that he couldn't be here, or would he laugh and boast? This was all thanks to me. Either way, I had to keep living. For my child's sake, I couldn't die. I had to protect Sylphie, my family. Sylphie and I took the first two letters of our names and altered them slightly to come up with her name, Lucy. Lucy Greyrat. Aisha laughed, calling it a cheap name, and Lilia smacked her over the head again. I was just glad she was a girl. If we'd had a boy instead, I might have named him Paul. Lilia chased me out of the room after that. There was much to be done, apparently, so she told me to wait outside. I moved to the living room and planted myself on the sofa. I hadn't really moved at all, yet I was exhausted. Roxy settled down beside me, looking weary herself, and sighed. She'd done even less than me, so hers had to be mental fatigue.
That was my first time watching a person give birth. It was amazing.
I've seen it a couple times now. About 3, I guess. But it wears you out even more when it's your own. Sylphie was probably even more drained. I would have to really show her my appreciation later.
I guess that must be how I was born, too.
Well, it's how everyone's born, isn't it? I didn't know much about how the Migard reproduced, but considering they looked just like humans, there couldn't be too much of a difference, right?
I'll be giving birth like that too eventually, won't I?
When I glanced her way, I found Roxy peering up at me, her face burning red. I slipped off my shoes and folded my legs under me on the couch, sitting as stiffly as I could. Yes, I hope I can ask you to do that for me. Now that Sylphie's baby had been born, it meant that Roxy and I would be starting the baby-making process next. Honestly, I was looking forward to it, even though Sylphie's baby had only just been delivered. I really was hopeless. Not that I hated myself for it, I couldn't. Not when I considered that Paul had probably felt the same way in the past. I can't wait. I thought with a laugh, and Roxy flushed a bright shade, wrapping her arms around her body.
Rudy, you've got a seriously dirty look on your face.
I was born with it. That's right, I was born with it. It was something I'd had ever since I came into this world, or perhaps even before that. Oh, that's right. Before I began that routine with Roxy, I needed to announce the birth of my baby. The following day, I made my way alone to the outskirts of the city, where a graveyard for nobles was nestled on a low hill. This was where we'd put Paul to rest. He might fuss over being lumped in alongside other nobles, but this place had better management than the one for the general public. I stood amidst the snow, before the Renoa-style round grave marker. I had no idea what religion Paul had followed. I didn't think he'd believed in God. He seemed the type not to worry about religion, so even if we'd made a mistake in that regard, I was sure he'd forgive us. Perhaps it would have been more ideal to make a grave for him in the Asura kingdom where Buena village had once been. Paul had no connections or relations to the land here, but if we buried him too far away, we wouldn't be able to visit him. I'd already informed Geese and the others of this location. We'd even visited once as a group. Each person had brought something along that they thought Paul would like. Alcohol, a short sword, that kind of thing. Geese and Talon had sat before his grave and drank themselves silly, earning the ire of the gravekeeper. I set about cleaning Paul's grave, a bottle of liquor that I'd purchased on the way crooked under my arm. I dusted off the snow that collected on his grave marker, shining the stone with a cloth I'd brought along. The road leading to the cemetery had been covered in snow, but the gravekeeper kept the pathways here plowed, so it wasn't difficult to tidy up Paul's area. I cleaned, then set the bottle in front of his grave and placed my hands together. I'd thought about buying flowers as well, but there weren't any for sale. During the winter in the Northern Territories, flowers were difficult to come by. Not that Paul was one for flowers anyway. Paul, Father, my baby was born yesterday. A little girl. She's Sylphie's, so I'm sure she'll grow up to be beautiful. I wish you could have seen her. I sat down in front of his grave and gave him the news. If Paul had seen her, I was sure he'd have fussed and cooed until Zenith scolded him. He'd have probably taken me out drinking to celebrate, and we'd have both drunk ourselves into a stupor. Then he'd have made a move on Lilia, exasperating Zenith. It was so in character, I could picture it clearly, the future that would have been if Paul were still alive and my mother hadn't lost her memories. I've made Roxy my wife. I have 2 now, just like you did. I wish she'd have taught me how to mentally prepare myself for it, though. Now that I thought about it, that was probably what Paul had been trying to talk to me about back then in the Labyrinth. He knew that Roxy had feelings for me, and that I had feelings for her in turn. Most likely, he'd wanted to teach me how to prepare for that. It's not quite the same. I don't suddenly have 2 daughters, but eventually Roxy will get pregnant and have my child as well. I'm sure that's still far in the future, but I hope they'll grow to be as healthy as Norn and Aisha. I had no intention of knocking Lilia's teachings, but I wanted my children to grow up as equals to be strong enough to withstand it when people called them half-demons. Apparently, Sylphie thinks I'm going to take another wife after this. I don't plan anything of the sort, but they do say that what happens once can happen a third time. Maybe she's right. I wondered if Paul had ever considered marrying Ghislaine El Annihilator Vieira. It seemed he did have a sexual relationship with Ghislaine, so I suspected he considered it at least once. Then again, Paul was a bit more open-minded than me, so perhaps he didn't think as far as marriage. Maybe I shouldn't overthink it either, huh? When I directed my question at his gravestone, it felt as if I could see him grinning mischievously back at me. All I could see was his smile. I couldn't hear any words. But it wasn't as if Paul had never thought things through. I was pretty sure he'd racked his brain for years about think. It only made sense. There were few people in the world who lived without thinking at all. Mushoku Tensei Volume 12 by Rifujin Namagonet, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit artale.ai and use promotion code ARTALE to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story. Father, I was a terrible son carrying memories from my previous life. I didn't love you like I should have, as my father. I said as I took to my feet. I took the bottle of alcohol in hand and gulped once. It was a strong liquor, burning like fire on the way down, and once I was done, I splashed some of it over his grave. But now I do see myself as your son. Maybe alcohol wasn't the best for someone like Paul, who'd screwed up by drowning himself in the stuff, but surely, today could be an exception. We were celebrating a new life in the world. I finally understand now. I'm still just a kid, a brat who pretended to be an adult by using his previous memories. I took another swig, then poured some for Paul. Another swig, then a pour. Soon the bottle was completely empty. Now that I have a child in the world and I'm a parent, I know I have to grow up right away. And in order to do that, I'll have to make a bunch of mistakes, grieve over them, and change slowly, gradually. I'm sure that's how you had to do it too, so I'll do the best I can. I popped the lid back over the bottle and set it in front of his grave. I'll come back again. Next time, I'll bring everyone else along too, I said, turning to leave. Many things had fallen into place, with a great deal of pain and a great deal of joy along the way. I'd repeated horrible mistakes along the way, but it wasn't over. No matter how much I screwed up or got things wrong, it wasn't the end. I still had a lot of life to live in this world, and that's what I was going to do. Live to the fullest, so that no matter when I died, I'd have no regrets.